Okay, happy Saturday evening. I am Mark W. Welcome to the channel. Mark W. and Rob Bob presents. Rob Bob is not joining tonight. Yeah, I'm doing something a little different tonight. So welcome, you fighting fantasy fiends, fellow fighting fantasy fiends. How about we go with as many F words as possible? Not that F word though. Um, yeah. So I got this book, and it's pretty cool. It is called You Are the Hero. Let me make my camera bigger. It's an interactive history of fighting fantasy game books. And although it is not a game itself, I thought it might be fun to stream it, kind of flipping through the book and maybe doing a little bit of a pseudo unboxing. It's not really an unboxing, I already opened it, but just to show all the cool goodies that it came with, perhaps. Um, so yeah, this is the book itself. You Are the Hero. It is by Jonathan Green, who is kind of one of the big names in game books these days. But he wrote this book. He's apparently a huge fan of fighting fantasy. I'm a fan of fighting fantasy myself, so he did all the legwork here. This is not authored by the original fighting fantasy authors, namely Ian Livingston and Steve Jackson. Although Jonathan Green did get in on the fighting fantasy game. He wrote a few books as well, but he also branched out to his own books, such as the Dracula book. What did I play of his? I played the Twas, which is a Krampus game book, and I also played on this very stream, on this very channel. I played that one, and the other one was Beowulf. Those are all very good. He does a great job. Yeah, so I thought I would show off the book a little bit and then play it, so to speak, read through it, that is. I'm probably going to just read through the electronic version, which is right under my face here, because I don't want to damage this book. Also, I don't want to have my overhead cam set up, but this is a really nice book, and I don't want to mess it up by propping it up in my stand with the arms that hold it in place and everything. Anyway, let's flip through some of the magic goodies that came with this thing. Here we have a bookmark. It's a Jonathan Green bookmark, apparently. There is a sort of pirate zombie on it. It has a link to his blog, or not a link per se, but you can't click on the bookmark. It mentions his URL. It came with a couple of neat dice and a pin. Here are the dice, so you can play with these. I'll probably just put them in my dice bag collection. They're pretty ordinary, except there's kind of a little bit of a really faint marble quality to them, like a little bit of white. It's almost hard to see on the camera. Quite hard to see on the camera. But it's not 100% red. And the one face, instead of the number 1, it says, "You are the hero," which again is the name of the book. And by the way, that phrase comes from, I'm not sure what the correct term for it is, but pretty much all of the fighting fantasy books, they had like I want to say subtitle, but that's not it. Like a little slogan they would just print on all the books that said, "A fighting fantasy game book in which you are the hero." So that was kind of like their catchphrase, I guess you could say. Another neat thing it came with is this pin. I wouldn't really necessarily see myself wearing this out of the house, but it's pretty cool. Maybe if I went to like a fighting fantasy or other gaming convention, perhaps I would wear that to let my geek side show. It's hard to get it out of this plastic right now for some reason, but I guess I don't really need to. That's all it is, really. It says Fighting Fantasy 1982 2022. Some other random goodies. Let's keep going. This sort of it's not a postcard, it's actually just a piece of paper. It's like an ad. It's almost like a poster. You Are the Hero: History of Fighting Fantasy Game Books, written by Jonathan Green. Coming autumn 2014 from Snowbooks. I wonder if the original, I know this is the one I have is not the original edition. I got this one recently. It was like a re-release and with new stuff added, basically. But I guess the original one might have been from 2014. So perhaps Jonathan had some of these left over. And he thought it'd be fun to just throw it in as a freebie, or just to get rid of them without feeling bad about throwing them in the garbage. Anyway, I think it's neat to have little tidbits like that. Here's a random This is like on cardstock. It is a print of some Alice in Wonderland artwork, which I guess is I think Jonathan Green did himself write a game book about Alice in Wonderland, so maybe that's the art from that. I don't know if this is the public domain art that you see everywhere for Alice, or if it's new artwork. I'm not really sure either way. But there was the you can see some of that public domain artwork in the Tunnels and Trolls game book that is based on Alice in Wonderland. That's called Alice in Weird World. That's the one that I contributed to somewhat. I did a lot of proofreading and play testing and made suggestions for balancing and stuff. Anyway, this is about Fighting Fantasy, not Tunnels and Trolls. Here is, I guess, another kind of leftover ad. This is for Fighting Fantasy Fest 4. That's a mouthful. Speaking of F alliteration. The F in Fighting Fantasy Fest 4. Celebrating 40 years of the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, 1982 to 2022. Featuring guests of honor, Steve Jackson and Sir Ian Livingston. Plus Fighting Fantasy authors and artists, talks and gaming, traders, collectibles, painting demo, auction, film screening. I wonder what kind of films they show. And that was on September 2020, September 3rd, 2022, which was a Saturday. The University of West London, Ealing. Yeah, I think they have these fests every year. I wouldn't mind going to one of these days. I have to like plan a trip to London. Might be a fun thing to do. I'm sure my wife wouldn't mind going to London for other reasons, and I could maybe check out the Fighting Fantasy Fest. That might be fun. I'll have to remember it though. I don't usually remember it exists until I like see people on social media posting pictures from it and stuff. I don't even know what this is about, but if I had to complain about one thing about this package is, and this is, you know, me giving it a 99 instead of 100 base kind of a thing. Think of it like that. But this sheet thing, it's about special characters. I don't know for what exactly, but it wasn't really packed well, so it's all kind of damaged at the edge. But anyway, this one says Wizard. You are Oscar Zoroaster, Fadrig, Isaac, Norman, Henkel, Emmanuel, Ambrose Diggs, a scientist and expert in the fields of surgery, vivisection, cybernetics, robotics, and artificial intelligence. To some, your esoteric arts make you a magician. To others, you are simply known as the Wizard of Oz. So apparently, yeah, this is some kind of a Wizard of... some characters for a Wizard of Oz book. That's all I can figure. I don't know why. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. I guess it's just another kind of free random tidbit. And it gets into the background of the wizard, originally from Omaha, Nebraska. One day your hot air balloon sailed into the land of Oz, and so on. It gives character stats even. Here's the wizard apparently, and a little I don't know what that is, a goblin. You know, I'm not too familiar with any of the Oz stories besides the classic movie Wizard of Oz. I haven't even seen the other movies like Return to Oz or whatever it's called. Anyway, here's his stats. Apparently he has agility, combat, and endurance, and some special abilities. But on the other side of this, they have the Wicked Witch of the West. So it's looking like in this, I'm assuming this is a standalone game book that you can buy. It looks like you can play as either the Wizard of Oz or the Wicked Witch of the West, which is kind of funny. And she is described as a dominatrix. That's kind of interesting, an interesting way to describe the Wicked Witch of the West. Some stats for her. Special abilities: Brains, Crow Master, Fearsome. Wicked Witch of the West fears no one and nothing apart from water. I'm melting. And here she is. She's apparently more attractive than in the movie. Okay. So that was another random freebie. This one is a another thing on cardstock. This is the wizard from the Warlock of Firetop Mountain. I should describe him as a warlock instead of a wizard. So this is a cool little art print. I might just kind of stick this on my wall. I have random cardstock things like this on my wall. I don't know specifically what this painting was made for. It might have been made for the sequel to Warlock of Firetop Mountain. I don't really know. And he's got this kind of fiery orb thingy. Maybe it's just a crystal ball that looks cool. It's got a skull in it. Got a skull-like thing in it. And that's pretty much all the goodies. Besides the book itself, of course. Now I was just flipping through the Kickstarter, which maybe I'll show real quick. This was a Kickstarter campaign, as you'd probably expect. And let me get rid of my ugly face for a moment. Or just move it out of the way. Here's the Kickstarter, if I can get this right. Here we go. And yeah, there's, like most Kickstarters, there's a whole bunch of levels of backing that you can do. So Crow is just donate money. Who does this, by the way? I don't really. Oh, you get your name in the acknowledgements. That's cool, I guess. But pretty much every Kickstarter has like thing like, hey, you can just give us money and get no rewards. So I've always wondered like who'd want to do that. I guess if you find the cause, so to speak, to be meaningful, you want to support the people. And sure, Wyvern, Big Leg. Now I don't know what all these terms refer to. I assume they're monsters in specific fighting fantasy books, but I'm not really that well versed in them that I can name all these names totally. Some of them are generic, like Wyvern or Goblin. The Goblin is 35. This is Great Britain pounds, by the way. So it's more than a US dollar. Shape Changer. Tree Man. Fire Demon. There's so many different levels to it. King Gillibrand. Now this is the one I decided to go for. Yeah, so you get it's kind of cumulative. You have to like kind of go back to determine everything you get, but you get the nice red leather bound exclusive collector's copy, which I thought looked so pretty I had to get it. And you get gold foil detailing and ribbon bookmarks. I don't think I noticed ribbon bookmarks, so maybe unless I'm missing something, and it's like hidden in there in one of these pages that I haven't seen. I think they might have messed up, but I won't judge it until I really look through it more deeply. It's signed by Jonathan Green, has a cover artwork print, which I guess was that wizard dude I was talking about. I guess maybe the painting was specifically for this book. 40th anniversary pin badge and 5 more. But you could go higher than what I did. I didn't go all the way the highest. There's the Yastromo. He's like an evil character in, I think, City of Thieves. This one is, it's basically paying another £50 just to get it signed by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston. Now, yeah, that's the only difference. So I guess I figured, I'm not going to pay another. I was already paying a lot of money. Another £50, though. Actually, I have their signatures on something else, too. So I guess I wasn't excited about it. And Stonebridge. This is for verified retailers only, whatever that's about. Anyway, let's look at the book a little bit, the physical book a little bit. Then I'm just going to switch to the PDF because, again, I don't want to try, I don't want to like risk banging up the book just to do this stream. As important as the streams are, I'm more inclined to mess up like a paperback than something that's really expensive and fancy. But here it is. It's really nice. It's got kind of I don't know what you describe it as. They described it as feather, but this almost feels like they described it as leather, not feather. But this has like a felt-like texture to it. It's like almost fuzzy. And let's get the whole book in the frame. Here's the spine. You are the hero. Jonathan Green. You can see the gold foil stuff, whatever you call that. On the back, we have the Fighting Fantasy emblem. Pretty neat. Yeah. The pages are all like nice and glossy and awesome. So again, I don't have my overhead cam set up, so I'm just kind of holding it up, and then I'll switch to the PDF after I show off some interesting things. Yeah, let's show off the signature, might as well. So Jonathan Green, signed it right here. I think when people sign a whole stack of books, they tend to get lazier with their signature, but that's okay. I like to think of how I got my wife a book autographed by Carrie Elwes, the actor, that she loved the movie Princess Bride. So there was a book that's about the making of Princess Bride written by Carrie Elwes, and he autographed them, but all he wrote was a letter C with a long tail. That was his entire signature. I was like, really? I could have forged that. Obviously, I wouldn't forge it. Anyway, it's got the nice, Yeah, nice quality pages inside, and a lot of artwork from the books and everything. I don't know if any of the artwork is original. Um, well, obviously the things like the sorry, I'm having trouble holding this quite right. As you can see, that like drag and header thingy is probably new and whatnot. But anyway, I'm gonna just kind of put this physical book aside now and switch to the PDF. And by the way, one of the reasons why I decided to do a stream of this is um it's kind of almost a game-like factor to this book, even though it's a history book about games. It has paragraph choices. It's not laid out like from start to end like a normal book. It's like a game book. You can say, you can start at a paragraph one or whatever, and it'll say, hey, if you want to learn about this part of the history, you go to paragraph 1 through 3. If you want to read about the artist so and so, go to 4, 5, 6. And I thought it might be fun to just kind of play it like that, sort of. And to pick the brains of the viewers in the chat. If you guys want to see one particular topic, you can yell out the paragraph number and I'll go to that. I'll weigh all the votes and what I'm feeling as well. I thought that'd be kind of fun to do. And here we go. Here's the inside page. A lot of credits go over here, obviously. A lot of people involved in something like this, I guess. Internal illustrations and photographs. I guess that's all these credits here in this whole paragraph look like. Illustrations and photographs. Cover illustration, copyright Ian McKegg. Judge Dredd is referenced here, apparently. But did they make a Judge Dredd game book? I know Games Workshop had some Judge Dredd games. Anyway. Contents. Tales from the Black Lobster Tavern. So let me see. I gotta make this nice and readable. Not this readable. No, maybe I'll just kind of move it around. Oh, this app is not good for that. I guess I'll have to do it like that. Tales from the Black Lobster Tavern. That sounds less appetizing than the Red Lobster. You can see my name in the acknowledgments at the back. I think it's cool getting your name. Yeah, it's kind of, it's not, not anything to take too seriously, but it's fun. It reminds me a little bit of the they used to have like Who's Who of high school students, those books, and they would just print your name in it, and you would pay money to get your name printed. So it's a little bit like that. Anyway, it's fun though, because this is something I actually, have some passion for, and it's fun. So that's a little different. Oh yeah, I wish I could scroll a little bit, but I could use my arrow keys. Okay. Eric says, I once backed a book and they forgot to put my name in. Oh no, that's horrible. I hope they refunded you. Like if it cost a certain amount just for that, they should have refunded you. I don't know. But sometimes it's a whole bundle, so it would be hard to like parse out how much your credit would be worth. Anyway, I actually had I was so pissed off at one point. It was, I think it was the Alice in Weird World book I was talking about. Maybe it was Elven Lords, Tunnels and Trolls Solo. Those are the two that I put a lot of time and effort into, helping to play test and proofread and offer suggestions for balance and stuff like that. It was one of those two books, maybe it was Elven Lords, that the editor-in-chief, I guess you could say was his title. He spelled my name wrong, but it was only in a digital copy. So it was online on DriveThru RPG, and the public could buy it. So I figured it was a done deal, and I was so pissed off. I figured that meant the print version would reflect the typo. They forgot a whole letter in my name, as people tend to do if they're not really paying attention to my name. My name is Ryn, W-R-Y-N-N. Sometimes people are, if they're not too attentive, they write Win, W-Y-N-N. So that's what they had, and I was pissed off. Anyway, long story short, he was able to revise it before the hard copy came out, and he updated the digital copy accordingly. So all right, fine. But yeah, I kind of know how it feels. It sucks. And Eric says, now I can do that with any book and prove I backed it. Oh, he said before that, Eric says they actually sent a card to all the people they forgot so they could stick it in the book. Well, I forgot a lot of people, I guess, huh? Anyway, let's get reading. When the Warlock of Firetop Mountain first appeared on the shelves of UK bookshops on 27th of August 1982, who would have thought that a mighty tome dedicated to the history of fighting fantasy would be written decades later. And who would have thought that during the intervening time, more than 20 million fighting fantasy game books would have been sold worldwide in over 30 languages? That's actually quite an amazing number. I mean, you kind of figure this is like a niche, nerdy thing. And maybe it is, but it's 20 million sold still. It's pretty amazing. And who would have predicted that the effect that fighting fantasy would have on the world, in part getting a generation of children of the 80s and early 1990s to read, or the fondness that has endured for the books ever since? I wouldn't say I would attribute it to reading for me personally, but yeah, I guess for other people that's true. Fighting fantasy game books are different from most books in that reading them is an interactive experience, not a passive one. Now I'm going to be nitpicky about punctuation. There should be a comma right there, probably. Anyway, it's fine. We're on this paragraph still. They are branching narrative adventures with a game system attached, hence the term game book. Set in worlds of monsters and magic, fighting fantasy game books place the reader at the heart of the story, giving them agency to control their own destiny. These are books in which you, the reader, are the hero. Choices empowering, being an interactive rather than passive experience. Fighting fantasy game books resonate with children who enjoy active participation. Readers read and play through magical worlds of wonder, deciding which way to go, picking up clues, solving puzzles, finding treasure, and rolling dice to slay monsters. That's the best part. Adding a game element to the branching narrative with multiple paths and endings make the books compelling. Didn't mean to be drawing there. One thing I always found a little interesting, and this is not to knock them or anything, but they talk about this like they invented the concept entirely, where actually, I'm gonna make sure I get my history. So you think of Tunnels and Trolls, the first solo adventure, which is a game book. It has dice rolling and monster fighting and character stats. That is from 1970. I forget the number. It's like 76, I think, maybe 75 even. And the first Fighting Fantasy didn't come out until 82. But they often talk about it like it was their own invention. Anyway, hopefully they don't watch this video and get mad at me. Anyway, but that's my take on it. I don't think that they invented it. They make it like it's their own unique thing they invented. It's just one really long-lasting and well-done set of game books for sure. That's the way I see it anyway. Anyway, where were we here? Yeah, adding a game element to the branching narrative with multiple paths and endings make the books compelling. Each book offers the reader multiple options as they try to find the correct route through in order to win, and usually read them many times, making different choices. Game books are proven to be excellent for reluctant readers. Whilst enjoying fighting fantasy adventures, readers are at the same time learning meta skills of problem solving, critical thinking, and algorithmic thinking. Interesting. Yet, the very existence of, excuse me. So I've been fighting this cold, and it's been like 3 weeks now. I'm more or less better, but I got this lingering yuckiness, and unfortunately, if I'm reading a lot like I am now, it's gonna come out. If I'm speaking a lot, I mean. So I appreciate your patience. Anyway, yeah. Yet the very existence of the Warlock of Fire atop a mountain was a result of its own attributes of skill, stamina, and luck. We would like to claim some skill in writing the book that began life with the working title, The Magic Quest. We certainly needed a lot of stamina to meet the demands of our publishers, who were suddenly eager to publish more and more books in what became the Fighting Fantasy series, and there was certainly luck involved in meeting the amazing Penguin Books editor Geraldine Cook, who managed to persuade her employers to publish The Warlock of Fire Atop a Mountain under the Puffin Books imprint. So here we are in 2023 or 2024, really now at this point. Fighting Fantasy is very much alive and kicking, now published in the UK by Scholastic Books and around the world in 10 languages. In 2022, we wrote 2 new books to celebrate the 40th anniversary of The Warlock of Fire Atop Mountain. Ian published The Shadow of the Giants, and with assistance from John Green, Steve published Secrets of Salamonis. Over here on the right column, when John Green first mooted the idea for writing a book about the history and legacy of fighting fantasy, we were surprised, flattered, and delighted. There were so many stories and anecdotes to tell, and so many people who needed to be thanked for helping make fighting fantasy what it is today. And we couldn't think of a better person to take on the challenge of telling the story. John started out as a huge fighting fantasy fan in his youth, and grew up to become a respected fighting fantasy author in his own right. And now he is probably the ultimate authority on fighting fantasy. That's pretty neat. In writing You Are the Hero, he has been relentless in his research and dedication to the task. The result is a fantastic achievement and a wonderful celebration of our life's work, for which we are very grateful. John, you are the hero. We are immensely proud of fighting fantasy. It's been quite an adventure. We hope that our books will continue to give pleasure to future generations of readers. May its stamina never fail. Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson, co-creators of Fighting Fantasy, London, 2023. Did I just skip ahead too many pages? I think I did. Okay, that was the Tales from the Black Lobster Tavern. Next page. All right, let's check out the background. I'll do another zoom in so we can see it a little better. Background. At last, at last, your 2-day hike is over. You unsheath your sword, lay it on the ground, and sigh with relief as you lower yourself onto the mossy rocks to sit for a moment's rest. You stretch, rub your eyes, and finally look up at Firetop Mountain. And so began my love affair with fighting fantasy game books. I remember pardon me. I remember the day quite clearly. It was bright and sunny, and I had been dragged into town to go shopping with my mother. Oh, I can relate to that. Always a boring time. The torment was lessened by the promise of a visit to a bookshop. Yeah, usually moms will be like, I'll take you to this one place that you like if you endure my clothes shopping for 3 hours. As I walked through the doors, I was hit by the smell of dusty carpets and freshly printed books, a smell I still savor to this day. And there, on a small display in the middle of the shop, was The Warlock of Firetop Mountain by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. At the time, I had no idea who the two authors were, but the image of the mysterious wizard summoning a dragon from his crystal ball had me gripped. Then I opened the book. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. It soon became apparent that this was not a book you simply read from cover to cover. You made decisions and turned to different paragraphs, directly influencing the course of the narrative. Then there were the monsters, fabulous creatures of legend, sat alongside the unfamiliar denizens of a new and terrible fantasy world. Not only that, but you fought them as well, rolling dice to determine the outcome of your battles with these horrors. And then there were Russ Nicholson's magical illustrations. I had read books with pen and ink illustrations before, but nothing like this. Graphically realized images of horrific beasts, partially eaten human remains, and sinister sorcerers were a revelation. I bought the book there and then, or rather I persuaded my mother to buy the book for me, took it home and devoured it. Yum, yum, yum. The reading experience would never be the same. I was 10 years old. Yeah, he was a big fanboy from day one, it sounds like. Mention fighting fantasy or the Warlock of Firetop Mountain to adults of a certain age, and they will either go misty-eyed or become a little overexcited as they recall their own battles with monsters like the Blood Beast and the Ganges, or such despicable villains as Balthus Dire and Zanbar Bone. Actually, I think Zanbar Bone might have been the one. No. I don't know. One of these guys is from City of Thieves. The name I mentioned before, Zostro, whatever, that was not him, I think. Anyway. Some people really absorb the settings of these books more than I do. I think they they remember all the villains' names and everything. I tend to not be quite as good at that. Fighting fantasy had a profound did I read this? No. Fighting fantasy had a profound impact on a generation of children in the 1980s and early 1990s. As a result, people's interactions with the books and their recollections of the hours spent poring over the adventures held within their pages, now inextricably linked with that vital stage of their development into literate adults. To say I was obsessed with fighting fantasy in my youth would be an understatement. I I collected the books religiously. I started writing my own. In time, I was forced to stop buying every new publication because it was considered to be a craze I would grow out of. In my teens, my grandmother once asked me when I was going to grow out of monsters, as she put it. It was always about the monsters for me. I wasn't the only one. There were loads of different types of monsters and encounters, says Black Library editor and author Nick Kime. One of the aspects of FF I always loved, or as Jamie Fry, the fighting fantasy collector, puts it, it wasn't often you went on a dungeon romp experiencing otherworldly finds and monsters only the wildest imagination could conjure. A couple of dice rolls of years later, my grandmother was the first member of my family to read my first published book, Spellbreaker, Fighting Fantasy 53. That's cool. 30 years after that momentous occasion in my life, and now aged 52, it doesn't look any more likely that I'm going to grow out of monsters now than it did when I was a teenager. No one book has had a greater impact on my life than The Warlock of Firetop Mountain. Yeah, he's pretty hardcore into this. I'll definitely say I was into fighting fantasy. I don't think I would say, this was the single most impactful book I read. So just different experience. I'm not knocking him or anything. If it had not been for that book, I would not have had my first fighting fantasy game book published, which would have meant I would not have become a freelance writer. And I would not have written the book you are now holding in your hand. He makes a good case. Writing a book such as this was always going to be a highly personal experience, but then its content taps into what was a highly personal experience for young readers and role players the world over. So just as writing and revising this book has been a highly personal experience, I am sure that reading it will be too. Those first fighting fantasy adventures made such a massive and vital impact on their readers that today many of the movers and shakers in the games and genre industries cite fighting fantasy as a major influence. But in the early days of fighting fantasy, such a glorious future was far from certain. So how did what started out as a book that was originally considered to be no more than a risky one-off experiment, as far as its publishers were concerned, become the worldwide multi-million selling phenomenon that it is remembered as so fondly, and by so many today? Well, there's only one way to find out. Now turn over. Okay, let me turn over. Whee! How about Duke from the Commodore 64 G.I. Joe game? Turn the disc over. All right, let's turn over to this page. How to negotiate this history of fighting fantasy game books. A number of abbreviations are used throughout this book. Fighting fantasy is frequently shortened to FF, while AFF is the abbreviated form of advanced fighting fantasy. A capital letter S accompanied by a number refers to one of the titles in Steve Jackson's legendary sorcery series. It is worth mentioning here how the fighting fantasy game books have been numbered in You Are the Hero. Puffin Books published adventures 1 to 59, but when Wizard Books took over publication, they published the original adventures in a different order, not once but twice. That's annoying. And started numbering the books from 1 again both times. That makes it confusing, I would think. To have a good sense of, the order in which they were published and whatnot. Just arbitrarily renumbering them with different print runs. Anyway. For the purposes of this book, individual solo adventure game books are numbered as they would have been had Puffin continued publishing the series. So, Eye of the Dragon, the first brand new title published by Wizard Books, becomes FF60, Bloodbones FF61, and so on, up to the most recently published adventure, Shadow of the Giant FF71. It's like 71 of these books. Holy. And I've probably only played fewer than 20, maybe even fewer than 15. Yeah, man. I'm just trying to think. I really don't know the answer to that. But yeah, if I really want to explore them all, I've got a long way to go. I don't necessarily feel the drive to play through all of them, but it's just amazing how vast the world of fighting fantasy is. There are exceptions to this rule, namely the sorcery adventures, which are numbered S1 to S4, the Clash of Princes duology, and the adventures of Goldhawk. The term paragraphs and references are used interchangeably throughout and refer to the numbered sections found in Fighting Fantasy game books. Look at Death rolling some dice here. Or some evil creature. Some undead creature or something. Also, while it is accepted that the hero of the Fighting Fantasy adventures rarely had a specified gender, partly an acknowledgement of the fact that most of the series' readership was male, and partly for sanity's sake, for the purposes of this book, the eponymous hero of the title is referred to as he. You will also notice that the text of the book has been broken into numbered sections. This is the interesting part, in my opinion. You can read it. You can either read the book from cover to cover, so you can do that, and it'll still make some sense, I guess. Or you can turn to different numbered sections when presented with a choice of topics that you might like to follow up on, instead of progressing in a linear manner. Or you can do a mixture of both. It's up to you. The terms Fighting Fantasy and the images associated with the books are used throughout by kind permission of the copyright and trademark owners, Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, and the creators of those original artworks. May the luck of the gods go with you on the adventure ahead. All right. So, whoops, what did I do? All right. Now we're on to the real first page. Chapter 1, The Origins of Firetop Mountain. Yeah, I'm going to play it as a game book because that sounds fun. So here's a cool looking dragon dude. I don't know what he's from. I guess he's from Warlock of Firetop Mountain. That would make sense to place him there. All right. Paragraph 1. When the Warlock of Firetop Mountain was published on Friday, the 27th of August, 1982, Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone could not have predicted that the world's first true game book. Sorry, I don't want. I really like Fighting Fantasy. I like these creators and stuff. I'm not big on this. Hey, you know, all the other stuff isn't really a game book. Come on. So I don't know. I'll let it go. Again, though, this is a large number of years. I could probably go find my Tunnels and Trolls. You know, it's possible they don't consider it a game book. They would say that's a solo RPG supplement or something. I don't know. To me, it's basically the same thing. Anyway, I'll let it go now. But what I was about to say, though, I kind of didn't finish the sentence, was that I'm pretty sure Buffalo Castle, the first TNT book, was 1975, maybe 76, which is actually quite a number of years. It's not like we're talking about, you know, oh, maybe that was from June 1982. No, it was like maybe like 6-7 years earlier. Okay, now I'm letting it go for real this time. First true game book would go on to spawn an entire series that in turn would inspire a generation of children and gamers like never before. Nor could they have guessed at the impact this publishing phenomenon would have on the culture, society, learning, and economy of not just Thatcher's Britain, but the whole world over, and for decades to come. But the premier adventure gamebook series that was to become the Fighting Fantasy phenomenon did not begin in 1982. It did not even, oh, well, okay, maybe they're trying to make a point about it was actually being authored earlier, and it didn't get published until 82. It did not even begin in 1980 when Penguin Books commissioning editor Geraldine Cook met Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone for the first time. In fact, it all began 13 years before that. Okay, if we're, well, all right, let's see what they say about that. To read about Jackson and Livingstone's first meeting with Geraldine Cook, turn to 6. To find out how Fighting Fantasy became a series of books, turn to 16. And I want you guys in the chat to chime in if you want to see any particular paragraph. I will take your choices into account, or if you don't care, you know, you can just be silent and I'll just choose on my own. But I think I'm gonna go with the Geraldine Cook meeting because I still have that curiosity. They're talking about 13 years before that and stuff. That kind of is interesting to me. Although the meeting with Geraldine Cook would be 1980. It wouldn't talk about 13 years before, I don't think. Maybe that would be the other option. All right, we're going to go to number 6. That's what Eric Johnson would like to see. All right, let's check it out. Oh, what's going on here? Hyperlinks. The Sorceress of Firetop Mountain. Meanwhile, a young editor at Penguin Books was finding her feet, having been given the ailing science fiction, fantasy, and horror list to look after. That editor was Geraldine Cook. Nobody cared about it, she says, speaking of the state of the science fiction list when she took it over. It did have some wonderful authors, and my predecessor, Paul Seide, had commissioned stunning new covers, and he handed me the torch when he left. I brought some back into print as early Penguin classics like Olaf Stapleton's Last and First Men in a larger B format, and tried to think of ways to inject new life into the list. That is how I came to approach Steve and Ian. I was the games editor as well as the science fiction editor. Cook's best friend, Jeff John, an avid Dungeons and Dragons player of several years standing, told her all about Games Workshop. He told me to ring these guys, Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston, and see if they could turn the game. Let's go over here, I guess. Turn the game or something like it into a book with a similar playing experience built in. If you can get him to do that, Jeff said, you'll be onto a winner. So Cook set up upon a fateful journey to deepest, darkest Hammersmith. I well remember walking down the road in Hammersmith looking for Games Workshop. They had been very friendly on the phone and pleased to take the call with the approach from a Penguin editor. They couldn't have been more welcoming and friendly. As a direct result of Cook's interest in Games Workshop, Penguin Books took a stand at Games Day 1979, Games Day being the annual retail and gaming event established by Jackson and Livingston in the same year they co-founded Games Workshop, ostensibly to promote a new book called Playing Politics. Fired by a combination of entrepreneurial bravado and youthful enthusiasm, Jackson and Livingston tried to persuade Cook to publish a book on the growing fantasy role-playing hobby, and so she invited them to send in a synopsis. Pardon me. We had a wonderful chat, says Cook, and they agreed to work up a proposal and outline for a game book, and that was the beginning. The book was intended to be a how-to manual of role-playing, but the synopsis that the two of them submitted was for a simple solo role-playing game presented within the pages of a book. And so the concept of the Magic Quest was born. When Cook received the synopsis, she suspected she had something special in her hands, but she found it hard to convince anyone else that this was the case. The idea was thrown out on his ear at the Penguin editorial meeting, explains Cook. Senior Penguin management roared with laughter at the idea. One laughing so much at the crazy idea of a game without a board and with all sorts of imaginary figures involved, Dungeons and Dragons, that he lay his head on the table and howled with laughter. I managed to keep the idea on the agenda for months and kept batting away at it. In the end, I was so angry that I withdrew the idea and went off to my room to brood. This all took about a year. That guy sounds like a jerk. You gotta wonder if people like that who laugh at new ideas, like how stupid do they feel when the idea is a success? Oh, imagine a game without a board. Ha ha ha. Anyway, so how did Cook eventually manage to persuade the powers to be to commission that book? One day, inspiration struck. I phoned up Patrick Hardy, who was the head of children's publishing, and told him about Warlock. He agreed to take a look and came down to my floor. That was unusual, as children's publishing and adult were entirely separate, and it was completely unusual for a Penguin editor to take an idea to the children's side. He had the proposal in his hand, and of course I thought he was going to reject it, but he said, we'd like to take this on for Puffin. I was overjoyed. At least someone who got it. The rest, as they say, is history. So, I'm sorry, I don't handle new pages well yet. Page transitions. All right, so we're at 6. All right, the deciding factor, pardon me a second, proved to be the Puffin Book Club, which operated in schools right across the country. Tony Lacey, head of editorial at Puffin at the time, felt sure the sales potential of the Magic Quest would be much higher if it was targeted at 9 to 12-year-olds. Here's a letter scan. That's pretty neat. This is from Penguin Books. Dear Ian and Steve, thank you for coming to see me yesterday. We agreed that early in January, remember this is before emails, you had to type this out and send it. What a concept. We agreed that early in January you will deliver a dummy spread for a solo dungeon book, which will be illustrated throughout in black and white and will be between 96 and 112 pages in length. You will give me an estimate of fee for the artwork. Ideally, we should be thinking of a final delivery around end March 1980. This was from December 19th, 1979. You are also going to explore with TSR the possibility of a penguin on Dungeons and Dragons, and come back to me on that in the new year. Best wishes, Geraldine Cook. Here's an update from 1982. So this took a few years to happen, but the update here is: Dear Ian and Steve, this is from Tony Lacey at Penguin Books. Here with the contract for the Magic Quest. Sorry for the delay, but it got caught in the Christmas chaos. It's the standard Penguin contract, which you've already seen, and I've altered clause, blah, 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 I don't know, to give a 7.5% royalty on any Viking paperback, which is what I agreed to do. I've also adjusted the delivery date in clause 1. If it looks okay, perhaps you could both initial and sign it, etc., etc. All right. All right, we're faced with another choice. To find out what happened when Fighting Fantasy became a publishing phenomenon, turn to 37. To read the Fighting Fantasy adventure Steve Jackson wrote for the Puffin Book Club's magazine, The Puffin Post, turn to 15. What do you guys think? Check how Fighting Fantasy became a publishing phenomenon, or what happened when that happened at 37. Or to read the Fighting Fantasy adventure Steve Jackson wrote for the Puffin Book Club magazine, The Puffin Post, turn to 15. I think I'm leaning towards 15 because I never heard of that, and that sounds like it could be fun. But if Eric or anybody else has any input to provide, I will take that into account. Again, apologies for the random coughing and stuff. I've had this lingering cold-like thing for weeks now, and I'm mostly feeling fine. It's just constant reading like this. It does bring out the coughing and stuff. Anyway, let's check it out. Page 15 or paragraph 15. Puffin Post. Let's zoom out for a second and see what we got here. Oh, here it is. This is cool. It's like a really mini game book. I get. Oops. Looks like it has Jeez, the mouse wheel is too sensitive. It just scrolls by pages too fast. Basically, it looks like they published a very mini game book with 29 paragraphs for that magazine. That's pretty neat. While we're here, let's check out this Fighting Fantasy fact in the top left. Over the years, many people have doubtless wondered about the origin of the name Zagor, or Zagor, pronounced so that the Z-A rhymes with Bay. Yeah, so there you go, Zagor, rather than with Ba. It was Livingston who came up with the name, having been inspired by the moniker attributed to the crossword compiler Zalen, whose work appeared in the Owl and Weasel. In Owl and Weasel, Games Workshop's original gaming fanzine. But who is Zalen? Who else other than Ian Livingston? Excuse me a sec. Livingston devised the puzzles while his then-girlfriend was the one who actually typed them up. Zalen was an anagram of their first names, Ian and Liz. Ha ha ha. Owl and Weasel fanzine issue number 6 right here. That's pretty neat. The newsletter from Games Workshop 15, Bolingbroke Road, London. All right, the Puffin Post now. Puffin Post was Puffin Book's own children's book magazine, which was a powerful marketing tool for the publisher. You don't need quite this zoomed in. Whatever, it's fine. Launched in 1967 by K. Webb, it boasted contributions from some of the most acclaimed names in children's literature, including Alan Gardner, not Gardner, Roald Dahl, Joan Aiken, Leon Garfield, and Spike Milligan. I definitely know Roald Dahl. I'm not sure if I know the other names. Its mix of stories, jokes, interviews, competitions, and quizzes proved very popular, and by the end of its first year, Puffin Post had 16,000 members. The magazine also featured reader contributions, and its height reached more than 200,000 readers. Excuse me. The autumn 1982 edition featured a rather special Fighting Fantasy adventure written by Steve Jackson to demonstrate how a game book worked. The Emerald Sunstone appeared throughout the magazine, with a section appearing on most of its pages. Instructions for combat involved the reader flicking randomly through the pages of the magazine to resolve battles. The Emerald Sunstone had never been reprinted until now, and special thanks must go to excuse me, both Jonathan Kelly for helping make this possible and to Steve Jackson for giving his permission for the adventure to appear here. To find out what happened when Ian Livingston met Roald Dahl, turn to 140. Begin your search for the Emerald Sunstone. I'm sorry, I'm going to do the Emerald Sunstone. Sorry if anybody disagrees, but I'm going to play this mini game book. Now, the thing is, I don't know how I'm going to resolve combats and stuff. Maybe it explains it in here. It said something like you had to flip through the original magazine to do so. So we'll see how this goes. All right, so you crash through the locked door. When you pick yourself up and brush the wood splinters from your leather tunic, you look around the room and see a strange scene. By the way, it says at the top, Emerald Sunstone by Steve Jackson. The room is bathed in an eerie green glow. As your eyes adjust to the dim light, you can make out various shapes in the room. Along one wall is a huge mural depicting a group of leering goblins taunting a large ugly creature brandishing a wooden club. To your horror, the figures in the mural are actually moving on the wall itself. In one corner of the room stands a table, and on it is an open casket. The room's green glow appears to emanate from within the casket. You squint to see what else is in the corner of the room, and can just make out a large silhouetted shape. A man of some kind is sitting at the table. Your hand reaches for the hilt of your sword. Yeah. I'll probably not stream this tremendously long because unfortunately I don't know if I can keep it up. Keep up the reading. Well, that's fine. We'll go as long as I can, basically. The shape from the corner barks out a command in a strange language. Startled by the sound, you spin around towards the mural to see 6 goblins peeling themselves off the wall. They now stand before you, fully armed and advancing. Now what do I do? I go to 4 here? I guess I just go to 4. I don't know. Why does it even start at 4? I guess this is 1. Paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3. This must be 4. Okay, fine. Figured it out. Figured out how to play the game book in a magazine for children. Your mission is to return the jewel to its rightful owner. Remember that you now have 6 goblins about to attack. Will you draw your sword and spring towards them? Turn to 15. Throw your sword at the man behind the table. Turn to 6. Run across the room towards the box and try to grab it. Turn to 6. Did I say 6 before? I meant 8. So to repeat, it's draw your sword and spring toward them. That's 15. Throw your sword at the man behind the table. That's 8. Run across the room towards the box and try to grab it. That's 6. Bid them all a swift goodbye and nip back out of the room. Turn to 9. What shall we do? What was it about the man behind the table? Large silhouette shape. A man of some kind is sitting at the table. Yeah. Why don't we just fight the goblins? How about that? Seems straightforward. But what is with the man behind the table? All right, let's turn to page 15. The goblins come towards you one by one. You chop down the first 3 and mortally wound the 4th in its sword arm. That was easy. The 5th you slam in the face with the hilt of your sword, knocking it senseless. There's 1 left. Turn to page 17. The last goblin swings his sword at your neck. You may be hit by this dangerous blow. Oh, that doesn't sound good. Close your eyes and close the magazine. Remember this page number so you can return here afterwards. Without looking, open the magazine to any page near the middle. Open your eyes. The magazine is now open in front of you and you can see 2 pages. Add the numbers together. For example, 22 plus 23 equals 45. This is an interesting random number generator. If the resulting number can be divided evenly by 3, for example, 45 divided by 3 is 15, then the goblin chop has hit you and you fall down dead. If the number cannot be divided evenly by 3, for example, 37 divided by 3 is 12 1/3, then you parry the blow and run the goblin through. If you are dead, you must start again. But if you have now killed all 6 goblins, turn to 11. All right, so I'm gonna try to fudge that with something else. I could probably use this magazine. Maybe I'll use the hard copy of the book that I have. I have to flip to something in the middle. We'll see what numbers I get. It's kind of a fun little mechanic. All right, so I'm going to open this up to whatever this is. I know you can't really see it, but I will tell you the page number. It's 134 and 135. Okay, time to break out the calculator. 134 plus 135 divided by 3. That's not divisible. You can see we have a big remainder, and therefore I kill the goblin. Yay. All right. I parry the blow and run the goblin through because math. Yeah, turn to 11 it says. You advance towards the shape in the corner. You can make out that it is indeed a man wearing a black cowl, but he appears to have no face. You light your lantern and shine it towards him. To your surprise, he shrieks and backs off into another corner, allowing you to grab the casket and leave the room. In the corridor, outside, you can see a door opposite and another on the right further down. Okay, to go through the door opposite, turn to page 14. To go out to the other door, to the next door, turn to page 10. Oh, pardon me. Oh, it's just kind of a random option. I'll go to the door opposite at 14. The door opens, and you are in a long disused prison cell. Human bones litter the floor, and the place smells foul. Will you investigate further, 29, or leave and try the door further down the corridor on the right? 10. I'll investigate. I didn't come here to just run through rooms and not check them out. So 29. Once again, my... Ugh. What, I don't know. I hit the wrong button for sure. Shoot, let me look for goblins or something. Or, yeah. Okay, now... Was I going to 20 something? 29, okay. $29. He starts sorting through the debris on the floor, but then suddenly the door slams shut. As it does so, you hear a clinking sound behind you and spin around to see the bones on the floor taking shape in the air. 3 fully formed skeletons now stand before you. You can either fight the skeletons, 23, or you may shine your lantern at them, 26, or look in your casket for something to interesting. I'm kind of thinking of either shining my lantern or checking in my casket. And I think by a casket, they don't mean like a full body, coffin kind of a thing. A casket can also mean, if you look in the dictionary here, it can also mean a small chest or box, as for jewels. And I don't know if it's British English that uses that more, or if it's just totally out of fashion in general. But yeah, you usually think of casket as a coffin, basically. Anyway, I think I will check the casket now that we've researched what a casket is so much. So let's go to number 5. Jeez. I gotta stop using the damn mouse wheel. It just... Okay, there we go. Number 5. As you open the lid of the casket, the skeletons stand still. They're waiting for me to dig through my casket. They are transfixed by the green glow coming from within. Suddenly, without warning, all 3 collapse into heaps of bones on the floor. Oh, there was some magic green anti-skeleton device in the casket. You can now leave and head for the next door down the corridor. Turn to page 10. All right. I will do that. You try the handle and the door opens. Seated in the room is an old man with gray hair, rocking slowly in a rocking chair. His head is in his hands. Oh, man. Is it severed or is he like this? He looks up at you vacantly and continues rocking. You ask him what ails him, and he tells you that his emerald sunstone has been stolen. He doesn't know how to get it back. You give him the casket. Oh, yeah, that was glowing green. Maybe that's it. Or ignore him and leave the way you came. What is my goal here? Am I supposed to be getting the emeralds and stuff? Oh, my mission is to return the jewel to its rightful owner. So this could be it, or it could be a trap. What do you guys think? What the hell paragraph was that? Here we go. 10. Yeah, so either this will win it. I mean, it's totally feasible that this will win it because it's such a short adventure. It's only like 20 something paragraphs. But it could be a decoy, and that would make me lose. I think I'm going to try it. So I'm going to go to 12, and if I lose from that, I will just go back or something. It's fine. Hey, Gleeman XRX is in the house. Welcome. We are going through the history of fighting fantasy book called You Are the Hero, in which it's a real world history, but it has paragraph choices, which is fun. But right now we're going on a little detour of a very early mini game book written by Steve Jackson that was published in a Puffin's book magazine. So it was actually like a very mini game book, like something like 20 something paragraphs. And yeah, let's see what happens. And we're supposed to return this emerald jewel thingy to its rightful owner. I'm suspecting this guy might actually be a decoy, but I'm going to try it anyway. Give him your casket. 12. He thanks you profusely, a little too much perhaps. As you prepare to leave, you look at him and catch an evil grin on his face. A doubt crosses your mind, and you ask whether he is the real owner, but he vanishes. I kind of thought that might happen. You have given the casket to the wrong person. You'll have to try again. But beware of this old man. The end. All right, I'll just go back right up here, and I'll hit the rewind button. I'll ignore him and leave the way I came at 25. Trying to figure out how to actually use this correctly. There we go. 25. Further down the corridor, you come to a crossroads. Will you turn right 13, turn left 16, or go straight across 19? Well, if anyone has a preference, shout it out, but it seems like a kind of random thing. I don't really remember if this is intersecting with the other room I've already been in. It's kind of hard to follow. I'll just go with the first one. That's usually my inclination for arbitrary choices. So I'm going to turn right and go to 13. All right, we have an apothecary, apparently. Some way down the corridor, you come to a door. A notice on the wall reads apothecary. You turn the handle and enter a room in which a man sits surrounded by bottles and jars. He offers you a sample of one of his potions. Gleeman X says, "Cool book. I just found the Kickstarter for this book. It looks like I missed it by 2 years." That there were multiple rounds of it. This one was just this year, so this is like a newer edition, I think. And in this one, it introduced the history being in gamebook format, I think. The funny thing is, I actually missed it too, but I saw a post by the author Jonathan Green somewhere, I don't remember where, in which he said he's taking orders after the fact, even though the Kickstarter ended. And that was my only exposure to this whole thing was via that post. So I said, hey, I guess I'll get in on that. I like kind of these historical books about, types of games I've been really into, whether they be video games or game books or whatnot. And I couldn't resist. Oh, here's a nice picture, by the way. This is the cover of. This is the artwork from the cover of the first sorcery game book. It's like this manticore. I always liked that one. And that book is called The Shamutanti Hills. I really got to get my hands on the sorcery books because they're a lot of fun. They're not technically in the Fighting Fantasy series. They're basically the same authors, though. It's a series of 4 books, and they're really, really high quality, in my opinion. Good writing and good gameplay. And it has a really cool mechanic for magic. And the way that works is, basically you can choose to be a warrior or a wizard. And if you're a warrior, you just get more skill points or something, and that's it. Simpler. But it's much more fun to be a wizard because you get a lot of magic spells you can cast in various situations. But there's a fun game mechanic, which some people might think it sounds terrible, but because there's a separate book that you buy. It's a spell book, and the sorcery spell book. It's just every page or maybe pair of pages, like left and right, is it describes a spell, and each spell has a symbol, which is basically just a 3-letter name. For example, one of them is FOF, if I recall correctly, which is a force field. FOF. Another is Zap, which is like you shoot little lightning out of your finger or something like that. But if you play the game by the book, you're supposed to study this spell book ahead of time and memorize the 3-letter code for every spell. And so the book will give you choices that you want to cast. If you want to cast FOF, go to this paragraph. If you want to cast Zap, go to that one. And if you don't remember what the spells do, you might use an inappropriate one at a bad time and screw up. Also, if I recall correctly, sometimes they would throw in non-existent spells as choices just to throw you off and make you waste your whatever power you use to power the spell. I think it's your stamina points. So it was a lot of fun. You really felt like you had to become a student of magic, and I don't know. It was just a lot of fun. I might try that sometime if I can get my hands on the books again. Not the Scholastic version. The Scholastic is the current publisher of both Fighting Fantasy and Sorcery. And I have a bunch of the Fighting Fantasy ones before I knew the horrible crime they had committed, which was they redid all of the artwork. They took at all the beautiful original artwork, the pen and ink artwork, I guess, and they replaced it with what looks like something that people digitally painted on their iPad or something. And actually, it's pretty good on its own merit, but it just sucks to see the original stuff replaced in favor of it. So I am personally not buying any new Fighting Fantasy or Sorcery books until they sort that out one way or another. But I might just buy old stuff on eBay still. Anyway, that tangent aside, let's get back to paragraph 13. Some way down the corridor, you come to a door. A notice on the wall reads apothecary. You turn the handle and enter a room in which a man sits surrounded by bottles and jars. He offers you a sample of one of his potions. Will you take some of his green liquid, 24, or the blue liquid, turned to 28, or return to the crossroads? Well, random guy in a dungeon is offering me green liquid or blue liquid. You know what? The sensible option would be ask him what this does. Ask him what these potions do. But that's not how it works. I'm going with the blue liquid. Because green is probably slime that eats you alive. That's my guess, and I'm running with that. 28. Zooming out. Oh, I think I'm dying. Okay. 28. As you drink the liquid, the man chuckles. You feel a strange tingle, and to your horror, your nose is growing rapidly from your face. What? The man laughs loudly at his practical joke. He gives you a pill which he claims is the antidote and ushers you out of the room. You take the pill, but it does nothing. His door is now locked, and you decide to return to the crossroads, but you now have a nose 20 centimeters long. Wait, I have to convert that to inches because that's what I work with in real life. I think that's like a nose that's like 8 inches long or so. All right. Gleeman X says, I have some of these Fighting Fantasy books on the iPhone. Cool. I think I know what you mean about the artwork being cartoonish, because I recall the books I read allowed me to toggle between. Yeah, I mean, you could say, the originals might be like comic book like too. But Gleeman X finishes his thought and says, between original artwork and new artwork, and the original art was much grittier and interesting. Okay, yeah. I think you're onto something. The new artwork was toned down and cartoonish. Yeah. I do like the original much better. And, I'm not that picky. I'm not going to, like I ordered a whole batch of these, right? Basically I had the games back in the day, or the books back in the day, but I don't know if I ever owned any of them technically. I think my brother owned all of them. And, I just played his, though. That was fine. We shared. But, I grew up, moved out on my own, etc., etc. I didn't have any of the Fighting Fantasy books until maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I was like, hey, maybe I'll get some. So I ordered a batch of like 7 of the latest ones. And I didn't know ahead of time before ordering that they kind of screwed up all the artwork. So it was disappointing to open it up and learn that. Um, to me, I'm not gonna like throw them out or buy them again just to buy their old ones on eBay just to replace. I'm not really that much of a fanatic that I care, but it was a little disappointing. Also, the cover artwork is Let me grab one of them real quick and I'll show you what I mean about the cover artwork. All right, so the cover artwork is not terrible, but what they did was they took like a kind of a full-fledged painting from the previous edition, I think. Don't quote me on that. And what they did is, like, this was a full-fledged painting. All they did was like circle the key character in the painting, right? And that's the entire, like, this was a full-fledged piece of art with all this background stuff going on and everything. And they do the same thing for this one. All of them are like this with the Scholastic books. Like, why would they do that? They just basically nullified like 90% of the artwork. And I'll try to see if I can dig up what one of those really looks like for reference, just real quick. I know I'm kind of going on a tangent, but why not? This is the time to do that, right? The History of Finding Fantasy stream. So let me try to find that real quick. Now, it's various editions with different artwork, so it's kind of hard to dig it up super quickly. But here you go. Here's no, that's not it. Sorry, bear with me a minute. Well, yeah, here we go. So this one here. Don't mind all this other crap that in my search. This is basically the cover art for the Creature of Havoc. Right now, it's a little bit it has a bunch of text on it and stuff because it's about an audio drama inspired by it, which is kind of crazy that this exists, by the way. But you can see, look, they just circled the main key part, and then they put all this border around. I don't know. I hate it. Again, ultimately, I'm not gonna have a fit and not play these, but it's definitely a downgrade. And that's not even talking about the quality of the internal artwork. That's just the cover. Anyway, let me move on from that silliness and try to find my screen here. Here we go. Let's see what you were saying, Gleeman X. These are reprints of original adventures, or are they producing new adventures? The ones I'm showing are reprints, but there were in the last few years 2 new ones, as they mentioned. They mentioned earlier in this very book I'm reading. One of them is called The Giant of, or The Shadow of the Colossus, or something like that. There was a new one, maybe 4 years ago, 3 years ago, written by the daughter of Terry Pratchett. I think her name is Rihanna Pratchett, something like that. I actually bought that one. I haven't played it yet. The cover looks like something that would appeal to preteen girls, but yeah, I figure all these other ones they have covers that appeal to preteen boys, so I thought it would be fun to try. I haven't played it yet though. Maybe I'll do a stream of that one. But it looks like some sort of I don't even remember, some kind of animal with like wings and looking fairy-like or something. Anyway, let's continue where we were here. So he made my nose gigantic. He didn't want to make another part of mine gigantic. But I'm gonna go back. I guess I could go back and drink the green liquid. That would be cheating. Technically, it's making me go back to the crossroads. But I don't remember what paragraph had the potion, so I'm gonna go back. Ugh. I'm still not figuring out how to navigate the pages very well here. All right, so back at the crossroads, you can go right, turn to page 19, or straight across. Yeah, and I'm not mapping this. I didn't really think I would even there would be any chance of my possibly getting confused about where I'm going. So, but I might be confused. I'm gonna go to straight across to 16. Maybe I need a map for this stupid little adventure. Actually, I think it's really cool that it includes this. All right, 16. You approach a door. You can hear muffled screams coming from inside. You throw the door open and see two evil orcs torturing an elf who is bound to a stake in the middle of the room. If you wish to rescue the elf, go to page 7. If you prefer to leave and go back to the crossroads, turn to page 22. I'll give you another sidetrack. This is totally what today... I don't know if who here is into game books or RPGs or whatever. This is a style of design that is, from what I've seen, largely frowned upon by the RPG community and probably the game book community as well. They call it Funhouse. A Funhouse adventure is there's just a bunch of rooms, and each room is totally nonsensical and non-connected. Each one's like a little self-contained scenario. Like you run into a room with an orc torturing an elf, or you walk into a room and there's a big pool and there's a sea monster in it. Or you walk into the next room and for some reason there's a troll sitting on a treasure chest. So you can try to talk to the troll or attack him. And, in other words, just there's no like sense to the whole thing. It's just like these little self-contained rules. And the whole, putting it all together, you think, why would there be this complex where in this room there's a sea monster, in the next room there's an orc torturing an elf, and in that room someone's sitting on a treasure chest. Like that's his entire life. The troll just sits on a treasure chest waiting for someone to challenge him. Anyway, my point is, this is generally considered a very old school and outdated way to write these things. I personally don't care. I think if it's fun, it's fun. And if I ever wrote my own game book or solo RPG module, I might very well make it just a fun house style one. Anyway, let's just stop getting sidetracked now and keep going. You approach a door, blah blah blah. Yeah, let's go save the elf. I'm gonna go rescue the elf. Turn to 7. The orcs have had their fun and agree to free the elf if you can answer one question. Okay. They ask you, what is your name? No, what is the title of Puffin's first fighting fantasy game book? If you answer correctly, yep, I'm correct. Turn to 18. Warlock of Firetop Mountain, right? I mean, that's not counting this thing that I'm reading now, right? Anyway, go to 18. Is it going to actually tell me what it is to verify? I don't know why this is so awkward to flip through. Or was that Penguin's book, the Warlock of Firetop? Now I'm a little confused. Hold on, let me look. I'm going to just Google it. Yeah, it was. Okay, it was Warlock of Firetop Mountain. Yeah. Pardon me. Again, I am still have this dregs of a cold-like thing. If I were better at hitting my mute button faster, you wouldn't have to hear it. I'll try next time. The orcs release the elf and leave disappointed. The elf thanks you and tells his story. The Emerald Sunstone belongs to his bride, an elf princess. They happened across this dungeon by accident and were captured inside. He was taken off by the orcs, but she was turned into an ogre and imprisoned in a living mural on the dungeon master's wall. Dungeon master. Alright, so we're just going to find this ogre. And probably need to transform her back. I mean, at this point, I've probably gone through a majority of the paragraphs, so there can't be that much more to do. Okay, that's it. It's over here. You return to the dungeon master's room. The elf grabs a sword from the floor and advances towards the black shape of a man sitting in the corner. You go up to the mural and offer the casket to the ugly creature on the wall, who reaches out to take the jewel. As its hands close around the sunstone, a transformation takes place. Pardon me. The ogre's skin becomes fair and soft, and its ugly face takes on the beautiful features of an elf princess. She steps out of the wall. You have found the owner of the Emerald Sunstone. All right, we only died once and got a giant nose in the process. I wonder what the other option was. Let's check it out, just because I'm probably never going to read this again. This might be it right here, actually. If I'd chosen the green liquid, the liquid tastes bitter, but you feel a glow inside. The liquid is a potion of strength. In your next sword fight, you automatically win without having to use the magazine to decide the outcome. You thank him and return to the crossroads, turn to 27. Yeah, that was it. That was the other option. All right. So we're done with the mini adventure. That's cool that they published that. I mean, that was probably more or less lost to time until they republished it in this book. All right, so where were we? I guess we're going to go back and find out what happened when Ian Livingstone met Roald Dahl. Which one am I looking at here? Hold on. Can't go back, can I? Okay. That was 140. Okay, sorry I'm confused so often. 140, Puffin Party. The 10th anniversary of Fighting Fantasy was also marked by Puffin Books, with a party held at their offices in London. But what was it like for those who were there? I remember Steve saying some very nice things in his speech, reminisces original commissioning editor Geraldine Cook, and signing my copy of The Warlock of Firetop Mountain. I had just successfully won the auction for a terrific book called Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool, and the author, Peter Turner, who arrived at the same time as the party to meet me for the first time, was hauled off by me to the floor on to the party on the floor below. He didn't seem to mind at all this rather odd introduction to his new publisher. Liz Attenborough, the head of Puffin, sweetly presented me with a Puffin badge and made me an honorary Puffin. I was chuffed. I still got my badge. It was quite a party, but a bit of a blur, confesses Livingston. What was he getting wasted? I can't remember much about it really, except that Steve and I were presented with 2 enormous hand-painted dragons cast in resin. And the actor Patrick Mower turned up and caused quite a stir. He'd starred on TV and in many carry-on films. I'm not sure what he's talking about. And I knew him from charity golf days. That connection led to Parker Brothers using him as the voice actor in the Legend of Zagor game. Huh. Another Puffin Books party I do remember was one where I met Roald Dahl. He had incredible presence, and I couldn't think of anything worthwhile to say. But the great man was brilliant and made me relax. He told me he knew about fighting fantasy and said that he thought interactive fiction was very powerful. He was surprised at how young I was, which I wasn't. Alas, nobody took photos. The buzz surrounding the landmark 10-year anniversary had an unexpected side effect on the Fighting Fantasy series. Return to Firetop Mountain sold better than the last few titles, explains Jackson. So Puffin agreed to continue the series. And so Coyne, I don't know how you say that, was tasked with organizing a new release schedule and finding writers who could come up with the good. And notice we really jumped far ahead here and is referring to a person that we didn't actually read about before. So I guess this whole paragraph branching history is not going to be super perfect. But I think it's a really neat thing anyway. I remember in one of Jonathan Green, the author, in one of his updates on Kickstarter, he was talking about how this whole paragraph thing he was trying was a lot harder than he had expected, and it was making the the job take longer. You got to give him some props. That's not I can't imagine trying to put this together. Anyway, finding writers who can help come up with the good and fast. Enter Keith Martin, aka game designer, parapsychologist, and X Games Workshop employee Carl Sargent, who wrote 2 new titles back to back, and new author Jonathan Green. Discover how Geraldine Cook first met Jackson and Livingston, turn to 6. To find out about a time members of the public. We already did 6, by the way, so we will not choose that one. To find out about a time, excuse me, a time members of the public were able to view one of the 10th anniversary dragon statues, turn to 279. Sure, might as well do it. Where's the start of the paragraph? Here we go. The last room, which became Death Trap Dungeon for the day, featured an exhibition of fighting fantasy memorabilia. Everything from Titan the Dragon, created to mark the 10th anniversary of the gamebook series back in 1992, and Ian McKegg's original cover artwork for books such as The Forest of Doom and City of Thieves, the Fighting Fantasy software packs, and The Salesman of Firetop Mountain, a guide written by Steve Jackson to explain the concept. How do I get this bar out of the way over here? There we go. Anyway, sorry about that. Where were we? Right, here we go. Steve Jackson to explain the gamebook concept to Penguin salesmen, including a number of items which were auctioned later in the day, such as the swords made to promote the release of the PlayStation 2 Death Trap Dungeon game. Yeah, we're way in the future. I mean, we're jumping around in history for sure. And wielded by the likes of Steve Jackson, Ian Livingston, and Kelly Brook. I'm not really sure who Kelly Brook is. Gleeman X says Forest of Doom was the first Final Fantasy book I ever played, and I never beat it. You know what? That one's pretty good, and I remember there's like a way that you can fail, and it like loops you back to the beginning somehow. Like if you take a wrong path or don't get the objects you need, and you could do that like multiple times. It gets a little frustrating. That's definitely one that you want to draw a map for, if I recall correctly. Generally, you want to draw maps for these. I think I beat that one. There's a couple that are so hard. Probably a lot that are so hard. The one that's called House of Hell, I think that's the name of it. That one is madness. It's so hard. It's a cool theme. It's like a haunted house sort of a thing, or like these Satanists in there, and they're trying to perform a ritual or whatever. But I can't even remember specifically why, but it's just so incredibly hard. And I played that in the app too, and I remember just grinding away at it and not having success. Like on my train ride, I used to work in New York City. I'm on Long Island. I still work for a New York City based company, but I work from home. But I used to have a long commute by train every day. So basically, I made use of that time by playing games on my phone. And so of course I got, fighting fantasy apps and such. So I spent a lot of time playing those on my phone, but it was always just so hard to figure out. House of Hell. Maybe one day I'll beat it. I did beat one with zombies. It was called like, I don't know. I don't know, it had the word zombies in the name. And you get like a score based on how many zombies you kill or something when you escape. I didn't get a perfect score, but I did pretty well if I recall correctly. Anyway. As well as the FF exhibition, the room was shared by the Fighting Fantasy artists who were attending the con, including, I'm not going to read all these names. It's cool to see a cartographer getting special mentioned, though. It was also here that many fans received their first glimpse of Damien Sparks' amazingly detailed sculpts of classic Fighting Fantasy characters and monsters. That is pretty neat. Let's take a closer look. Yeah, this is the guy from the cover of Forest of Doom. It's the evil lizard man guy, and this one is from is it Death Trap Dungeon? It's one of the very early ones. I think it's Death Trap Dungeon. This guy I don't actually recognize. No, I'm not sure. That's not the Lizard King. Is that the Lizard King? I think. Well, has he got like a panther on a leash or something? I don't think that's the Lizard King, is it? Let me look up the cover real quick, though. Island of the Lizard King. Now, that one I always thought was a pretty fun one, and as I just mentioned, I live on Long Island, and I don't pretty much I've always done so. They have some names, location names, inspired by Long Island in this book. For example, we have a town called Oyster Bay, and what do you know? There's a location called Oyster Bay in this book, and also the famous Fire Island is here along the south shore of Long Island, and there's a Fire Island in this Island of the Lizard King too. It's kind of funny because it almost does sound like a fantasy location named Fire Island. And Oyster Bay sounds, well, maybe not fantasy, but somehow I don't know, somehow it seems to fit in with the theme of the book. Anyway, how did I get here? Geez, every time I do anything, I lose my place. All right, well, maybe I'll just pick a random spot to resume at. Especially for miniatures, I didn't expect to find this many references to the word miniatures. Why do they call it Fire Island? You know, I don't even know. I can look it up real quick. I'm on the Wikipedia page. I'm like, I lived here my whole life. You know, I'm 40 something. I have no idea why they call it Fire Island. It has a reputation, by the way, of being like a gay center, but it's not totally that. I mean, but that has nothing to do with the name. Just to be clear. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I was gonna read it. It's not obviously apparent from the Wikipedia page, but it may have some connection to. No, never mind. I was gonna say maybe it had connection to indigenous Native Americans, something they referred to it as, but I don't. I think I'm making that up. Anyway, yeah, that's something I should figure out one day. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna jump around randomly now. Let's say we'll do that. Here we go. I kind of like when they talk about individual books. Like here's one I had played. Talisman of Death was one of the first ones I had played, if I recall correctly. Talisman of Death. Let's check out that one. The 11th book in the Fighting Fantasy series was a collaboration between Mark Smith and Jamie Thompson. So, yeah, eventually you could see, you know, not all the books were by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, although for a while it was just them. There's actually the other Steve Jackson did some of these books, which is kind of funny and confusing. So in the kind of tabletop gaming world in this particular era, there were two well-known Steve Jacksons. And that's kind of funny. There was the UK Steve Jackson and the American Steve Jackson. So Steve Jackson Games is a company founded by the American Steve Jackson, who's in Austin, Texas. And he makes probably the most famous game over in history of history of his company is Munchkin, which is not a game I'm a fan of. I do like some of his other games though. Like GURPS was a favorite of mine, an RPG. That stood for Generic Universal Role Playing System. So it was like the first kind of generic system for RPGs where you could plug in different settings essentially. I used to like his cartoon role playing game called Toon. He published it. He didn't write that one. Anyway, he's got some good stuff and bad stuff, I guess. But yeah, somehow Munchkin is like printing money for Steve Jackson, and I never liked Munchkin. But anyway, the point is, yeah, they're UK Steve Jackson and American Steve Jackson. And the funny thing is, American Steve Jackson actually did write at least one of these Fighting Fantasy books. So it's totally confusing about which Steve Jackson they're it's even referring to. I wonder if I can find a reference to that. American Steve. No, searching for American Steve doesn't give me anything. Here we go. Demons of the Deep. I know I'm kind of just jumping around, but hey, I'm having fun. Hopefully it's enjoyable to you guys too. Demons of the Deep. Another nautical adventure after a fashion. Demons of the Deep, number 19. With a second Fighting Fantasy game book to be written by American game designer Steve Jackson, as opposed to the British game designer and co-creator of the Fighting Fantasy series, Steve Jackson. So when I saw these back in the day, like, look at this. You see Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, like all the other books. Who do you don't think it's going to be a different Steve Jackson? I wonder how the American Steve Jackson felt about that, because it looked like he wasn't getting any credit in a sense. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't care, but I wonder if he considered. I'm sure he did. Something like putting his middle name in there or middle initial, or maybe it should have said, U.S. USA, Steve Jackson, and Ian Livingston percent. No, just being silly, of course. And Gleeman says, "Oh, GURP Steve Jackson is not the same as Fighting Fantasy Steve Jackson." ROFL, never knew that. Yeah, that's it's ever since I first learned that fact years and years ago. Other people who know of these games, gamer nerds, I guess, they don't all necessarily know that fact. Though people are still learning that to this day. Apparently, hey, you might be the most recent person gleaming next to learn that that fact. It's kind of funny. Um, yeah, I remember enjoying this one. Is a Oh, it probably explains it here better than I will. So let's read over it. In it, the hero becomes the first mate of the merchant ship Sunfish. Right at the start of the book, the Sunfish is attacked by the pirate ship Troll, a vessel under the command of Captain Bloodaxe, the terror of these seas. The only survivor of the attack, the hero, excuse me, the hero is forced to walk the plank, but as he sinks to the bottom of the ocean, mysterious magic takes over, enabling him to breathe underwater. Saved from drowning, the hero sets about discovering the means by which he might be revenged upon the murderous Bloodaxe. So yeah, it's kind of cool. It's like the whole thing takes place underwater and you can magically breathe. So you're fighting, it's been a long time since I played this one, but I guess you're fighting sea creatures and whatnot and exploring some undersea civilization and stuff. I always thought this kind of bone demon thing on the cover was pretty neat looking too. Undersea demon. Like Fighting Fantasy's previous sea-based adventure, Seas of Blood, Demons of the Deep was illustrated by Bob Harvey. However, this time its cover was painted by Fanfi and Fighting Fantasy art veteran Les Edwards, and it depicts the bone demon from the book, rising from its cave beneath the sunken ruins of Atlantis. That's right, you literally find Atlantis in this book. And Gleeman exists. Yankee Steve Jackson and Yorkshire Jackson. Yeah, there you go. Oh, Yankee Jackson and Yorkshire. Yeah, that's how they should refer to themselves. It's kind of funny. I mean, I guess it's not that rare of a name in a sense. Steve's a very common first name in both our countries, and Jackson is too. But it's kind of funny that they both came together and they both got into the same kind of fantasy gaming stuff in the same time period. But yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people. I mean, when I first, when I was first playing this book, I'm pretty sure I didn't make the distinction. I don't really remember when I first learned about that, but it was I don't know. It's kind of interesting. That's all. I always enjoy making up monsters, said Edwards. Although sometimes what works in written word doesn't necessarily work visually. And somehow we're at a lizard man in space. Gee, I don't know. I just use the scroll wheel, and it's only I'm like 5 pages down. I gotta figure that out somehow. Now I'm 5 pages up. I guess it was just 1 page up. Demons of the Deep. Let's read a little bit more. It's also notable for including the marine-dwelling deep ones, which appear to have been inspired by the creatures of the same name from H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. Much of the action takes place in the sunken ruins of Atlantis. Excuse me, meaning that when Mark Cascone came to write Titan, the Fighting Fantasy world, he had to shoehorn the legend of Atlantis into the histories of Fighting Fantasy's made-up world. Atlantis, now located on a vast antediluvian island, lying in the shadow of the massive volcano Atlan's Beacon, appeared on a map in Titan, the Fighting Fantasy world, which, like the other maps in that book, was created by Steve Luxton. And we have a choice here. I'm kind of jumping around, but I'm going to follow the choice again. And I think I want to click the second choice. It says, to read about another adventure in which pirates play a significant role, turn to 194. To read about another adventure that featured Lovecraftian horrors, there we go, turn to 81. That's what I want to see. And I only learned of this one like a week ago, actually, when I saw some pictures on a Facebook post from, this is not the one 81. Yeah, this is the one I expected. Beneath Nightmare Castle. Beneath Nightmare Castle features some particularly disturbing failure references. I guess, describing how you die, essentially. But quite possibly the reason why many remember the adventure now is because of something that did not appear in the book. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know what it is yet. As opposed to something that did. Dave Carson was a tried and tested fantasy illustrator before he was tasked with producing the art for Beneath Nightmare Castle. His sinister and sometimes downright insane images matched the tone of creeping dread and rising madness. However, an image of a woman with tentacles emerging from her mouth was deemed too much for Puffin editorial at the time. And that's one of the pictures I saw when I encountered this like a week ago. I wonder if they'll show that. I could show you that if they don't show that. It looks like they don't show that. I wanted to write something different, something removed from the sub-token sword and sorcery world that so much fantasy roleplay inhabits, or did then, admits Darville Evans. So I went for horror, and I thought readers would like Lovecraftian Cthulhuid monsters with tentacles and obscene appetites. I don't think many artists could have done justice to Beneath Nightmare Castle in the way that Dave Carson did. But how does the author feel about the offending image being removed from the book? When you're a previously unpublished author working on a book in a standardized series, you have no alternative but to obey the publisher. I did that. I did argue with Annie Winterbottom. Sorry, that's the name. Annie Winterbottom. You know that's an English name, right? All right. I'm going to stop laughing at Annie Winterbottom and say I did argue with Annie Winterbottom at Puffin. In fact, probably much more than I should have done. I was probably regarded as a nuisance. I took the view that children like to be scared. You just have to look at the gruesome deaths in fairy tales. Good point. And I thought fighting fantasy readers would cope with a picture of a woman whose open mouth was sprouting tentacles. But when Puffin said no, Dave and I just lived with it. The irony is that much more graphic images have appeared in later fighting fantasy adventures, particularly in the case of some of the titles published for the first time by Wizard Books. To read about Darville Evans' next adventure, which was set in the same part of Titan, turned to 91. To find out how one artist felt about having to draw gruesome images, that's what I'm going for a Fighting Fantasy game book, turned to 270. But first, let me find the image that I had just shared. I think it was just about a week ago, maybe two. Here we go. Yeah, so it exists. I mean, I don't know where it came from, but I saw a post about this very book, and this was me learning about it for the first time. I shared it with my friends on June 18th. So yeah, like 11 days ago. Anyway, I'll show it real quick. This is I mean, I don't think this is going to upset anybody. I would give you a warning if I really thought it would, but you know, it's this. So there you have it. That was a big controversial. I mean, you know, sure it's gross, but I mean, I don't know. It's not like it's you could think of worse things. Think of something like the movie Evil Dead, what happens to that girl with the trees. I could see if they didn't want to publish that. Anyway. Yeah, I'm gonna go click on what the artist thought about drawing gruesome images. Excuse me. Find out how one artist felt about drawing. Yeah, 270. Oop. Okay. Oh, it's on the right page. 270. It was the first time a modern setting had been used since Steve Jackson's House of Hell in 1984, which is referring to, I guess, the zombies one here. Yeah, that's the one I played in the app form, I think. Blood of the Zombies is the one, yeah. Anyway. That wasn't the only change from the norm. Livingston tweaked the game mechanics as well, doing away with skill and luck altogether. Excuse me. But while such an action was regarded as being on the verge of sacrilege by some, others felt that Livingston did not go far enough in changing the mechanics. As a designer, I was always disappointed with them, says Jake Thornton, the man behind such modern classics in the making as Mantic Games, Dreadball, and Mars Attacks tabletop war games. They're sort of D&D light that you can play without the effort of a dungeon master. However, because you still need pencil, paper, and dice, They are still tied to a table. I always thought that they missed a trick. Why not design them to need nothing but the book? Then they could be played on buses, trains, in the back of a car on the way to a season. I'm thinking about that and thinking about, I mean, basically, if you do that, there's a couple ways you can do that. One way is just make it like good old fashioned choose your own adventure books where there are no concepts of stats and keeping track of the items you're carrying and whatnot. And so, in that sense, it's been done. There is another sense you can do it. The Lone Wolf game books, of which I don't own any. The Lone Wolf game books were like, you had a character sheet. So, but you could just write it in the book. Like all these books have a character sheet like this. I don't know if you can see this too well. So you could just write in there. But then you think, what about the dice rolling? Well, here's the thing. The actually, these books have it too. Yeah, I forgot about this. They have a different mechanic. But the Lone Wolf books, what they had was one page that was a grid. And in Lone Wolf, you used a single D10 for everything, a 10-sided die. So what you could do is there was like a grid and it took up a whole page. And it was just randomly assorted digits from 0 to 9 or 1 to 10, however they did it. And they said, if you don't have dice or you're not in a place where you can use dice, you can just take your pencil and poke it at one of those squares on the grid, and that was your roll. So they could have done something like that. But I did realize, though, that if you look at the bottom of these books, and it might even exist in older editions, they have, let me make my camera a little bigger. They have actually dice rolls on the bottom, so you can just flip to a random page and see, oh, I rolled a 9. So in a sense, you could do what this guy's suggesting, I guess. Anyway, just thought I would talk about that. But Gleeman X says Cthulhu art is so ubiquitous these days. Yeah, that controversial pick by today's standards is almost normal. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really that crazy, I guess. Yeah, the Cthulhu stuff is it's almost trite at this point. One thing I think about Cthulhu is I think they draw him wrong usually. Probably 90% of artists don't draw him in a way that makes him seem like he's otherworldly and his mere appearance drives you mad. Now, how do you draw something that his mere appearance drives you mad? I don't know, but what I find is many depictions of Cthulhu look something like, I don't know why I'm going on another sidetrack. I figure I might as well. He doesn't usually look so alien. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to run into this guy in an alley. But look at this. To me, this looks relatable in a human way. Look, he's got this brow going like this, like he's pissed off at me. There should be nothing about him that makes me think, oh, he's angry at me. And look, he's got these human muscles and everything. He doesn't look alien enough in my view. And I don't like glowing red eyes unless something's supposed to look silly and cartoonish. Glowing red eyes, as soon as you draw glowing red eyes, something doesn't look scary to me. It just looks like a cartoon. So that's my rant about the way Cthulhu artists tend to draw. He's looking like he's human angry. If he's supposed to be so otherworldly that just looking at him drives you crazy, he shouldn't look like he's pissed off at me like my crazy road raging neighbor is when he's mad. He shouldn't look like him. Anyway, that's my Cthulhu artist rant. Sometimes they do draw him looking like very alien. But usually it looks like an angry human with glowing eyes, in my opinion. Anyway. I mean, not that he looks like a human per se, but there's expression to him that you can gauge what he's trying to convey to you, which means, I don't know, maybe that's my own weird way of thinking. I don't know. Anyway, Gleeman X says, do you know if these fighting fantasy books are sold in digital form, aside from the few and interactive app? I looked for Beneath Nightmare Castle, but not finding anything for sale digitally. I haven't heard of that, so I'm guessing the answer is probably no. There's always, I'm sure, some less than legitimate locations, you can probably find PDFs that are scanned. I do not endorse it. I do not endorse doing that. But yeah, I only know of the apps as far as electronic forms that are legit. Anyway, now that I've made my stupid Cthulhu rant, where are we? I guess we're going to go to the next page of that paragraph. This guy looks kind of cartoonish too. That's alright though. I kind of like the busting through the door. It looks very like energetic, and they see the splinters flying and everything. That's pretty cool. And this looks pretty nice. Look at this picture here. I like that. Somebody's got to clean their ceiling though. Look at that. I don't know. I don't know what that stuff is on the ceiling. Excuse me. All right. In March 2012, an illustration from the book went up on fightingfantasy.com. It was the first of several. The style was clearly quite different from what fans of the series were used to seeing. The illustration was by Kev Crossley, an artist new to Fighting Fantasy. Zombie Attack by Kev Crossley. I knew of Kev Crossley from the days when he worked at Core Design when I was executive chairman of Eidos. How do you pronounce Eidos? But didn't actually know him, says Livingston. I'd met Andy Ewington through Matt Woodley, another ex-Eidos employee. Andy seemed to know every comic book artist in the known universe. He showed me some of Kev's illustrations, and I thought he would be perfect for the job. I spoke to Kev and signed him up to do the black and white illustrations. Andy Ewington told me he might have a cool project I'd be well suited for, explains Crossley. I rolled my sleeves up and instructed him to tell me more. When he told me what the project was and who I'd be working with, I was a bit stunned. The process began with me producing a couple of test illustrations for Ian to see if I was suitable. So I worked to a brief which described 8 zombies attacking you in an old blacksmith. I spent a full week drafting the image, getting the perspective nice and dramatic, and cramming as much detail into it as I could. Ian, I was enthusiastically informed, was something of a detail fan. Detail is what he got, and luckily he loved it. Cool. So I met with Ian, and we got along just fine. It was a special treat for me as well, because he brought along a fat folder stuffed full of original art from lots of FF books he'd written in the 80s. I loved his concept for the new book, and I left that day with a signed copy of The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, plus a monstrous pile of zombies to start sketching. It was a great experience. When the project got into its stride, but grueling too, keeping that level of detail up within a set time period is always draining. But Ian was a pleasure to work for, and he didn't mind when I needed to let up for a few days from time to time to recharge my batteries. He was also very focused regarding his vision for particular scenes, so quite often we would work closely together. I'd send him a sketch, he'd send me comments about what he'd like changed, then I might come back with my own ideas, etc. It actually impacted on the delivery dates a bit sometimes, but it resulted in some fantastically rewarding creative exchanges, and you don't get that with all art directors. As a result, the images I did for Blood of the Zombie are still some of my favorites. Here's Amy Fletcher and Zombie Chainsaw Massacre. The zombies wielding the chainsaw. Okay. Livingston found those creative exchanges equally rewarding. I really enjoyed working with Kev. His attention to detail was incredible, and he seemed undaunted even when I asked for tiny changes that probably weren't necessary. The end result was fantastic, and I bought all the originals. Andy Ewington also introduced me to Greg Staples, who was likewise brilliant to work with. All right. So I'm going to start winding down the stream soon. I do want to get to bed probably within the next 15 minutes. I'm thinking of jumping to when they talk about some of the earlier Fighting Fantasy game books that I knew and loved, and maybe just reading the paragraphs on those. Or if anybody in the chat wants me to look up a particular one, for example, maybe you like, I don't know, City of Thieves, and you want me to check that one out, then feel free to call it out in the chat. But yeah, I'm going to check out a few more on my own volition. I'm kind of not doing the whole paragraph branching thing anymore at this point. That's fine. They look like a lovely bunch. Look at them. They queue outside the first game shop store on its opening day. We could always check out some of the artwork. Oops. Ugh. There's a map somebody drew. Huh. Oh, that's the original plan for the first half of the Warlocks dungeon. Yeah, they probably talk about this here, but Ian Livingston and Steve Jackson each worked on half of the Warlock of Firetop Mountain at the same time, and as I understand it, they didn't really consult with each other much, so they just kind of had these two disparate parts, and then they glued them together. Where the later part, the second half, I don't remember which author made it, was more like a big complicated maze. And so basically when you enter in the big complicated maze part, suddenly it feels like a whole switch in tone and play style. And the maze is quite difficult, if I recall correctly. It's not easy to solve. Gleeman X says it was a vampire book I played last year. I'll find that. Oh yeah, I think I know of that one, but I don't think I ever played it. Yeah, so if you find that name, I could check out the history of that vampire book. Otherwise, I'll keep looking for something that appeals to me personally. Citadel of Chaos. I think I played that one on this channel a little bit. Yeah, I did. Let's check that one out. I think it's number 2. The Citadel of Chaos was the second one after Warlock of Firetop Mountain. You can see here. This is very. This looks like something like I would have drawn on my notebook in 5th grade. But yeah, this is right after Warlock. After Warlock of Firetop Mountain had done so well, Puffin wanted to know if we could turn this into a series. And yes, we could. At a meeting in Philippa, how do you say? I don't know how to say any of the names today. Philippa Dickinson's office. She wanted to know what we should call this series. Ian came up with Fighting Fantasy. I think at the time it was just expected to be a working title, but it never got changed. It's funny how things like that happen. Somebody will just make a name that they think is not great, but just call it something in the meantime, and then it sticks forever. Now I see that as a software engineer sometimes. Usually not in the same kind of way at all, of course, but I might name something stupidly, like I'm making a new code repository. I don't know what to call it. I'm going to call it the cool thing API. Then suddenly cool thing API. The cool thing API it propagates everywhere. Everybody's calling it the cool thing API. And it sticks forever. Anyway, work started immediately on another 2 titles. Any difference in writing style should no longer be an issue, since the 2 authors were now working on one new book each. Yeah, you can see what I alluded to earlier. There was that whole difference in, not even just the difference in the gameplay between the 2 parts of Warlock of Firetop Mountain, but even the writing style. Like you can definitely tell it's a shift in authors. But they decided to do away with that by each working on one new book at the same time separately. I don't recall if they did they like stop collaborating directly from this point onward or not. I would imagine they must have at least once or twice after, unless it was really that bad the first time. They probably mentioned that somewhere in here, but I do have to wrap up this stream somewhat soon, unfortunately. But yeah, to have a clear idea of how big a success Fighting Fantasy was in those early days, just compare the average print run from a typical children's book at the time with that of a new Fighting Fantasy title. Seems like a decent benchmark. I have a memory of, in its heyday, printing around 80,000 copies as a first printing, says Dickinson. In those days, with children's book, it could be 3,000. It was huge, a huge bestseller. That's pretty neat. I wanted to read about Citadel of Chaos, but now I'm curious about these things, these options, which are to read about when Fighting Fantasy books topped the bestsellers chart, turned to 37. To find out which Fighting Fantasy adventures sold 350,000 copies in its first year alone, turned to 24. I'll start at 37. In March 1983, The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, Citadel of Chaos, and The Forest of Doom topped the Sunday Times bestseller charts. Two more titles, Starship Traveler and City of Thieves, appeared later that same year. Having seen how successful the series was, other publishers began jumping on the bandwagon, rushing out competing gamebook series of their own. But Puffin Books, fully aware that they had a certifiable hit on their hands, were keen to maintain their position at the head of the game. Puffin decided our best battle strategy would be to publish a new fighting fantasy book every month. Wow, says Jackson. There was no way Ian and I could write a book every month, so we decided to commission other authors and call it the Jackson and Livingston Presents series, which is kind of like Mark W. and Rob Bob present, only not as cool. To begin with, Jackson and Livingston appointed the Presents series authors Jamie Thompson, Paul Basin, Steve Williams, Mark Gascon. Gascon. Sorry, I keep struggling with this one. Peter Darville Evans were all Games Workshop staff, so it was easy to keep a check on their fighting fantasy books. The impact Jackson and Livingston's involvement in fighting fantasy had on Games Workshop was considerable. Peter Darville Evans, a Games Workshop employee at the time, has this to say on the subject. I remember driving a van to a hobbies trade fair with Ian Livingston in the passenger seat, a pad on his knees and a pen in his hand, writing his next fighting fantasy book. We simply could not keep up with the demand for fighting fantasy, says Livingston. It's funny, really, that when the Warlock of Firetop Mountain was first published, Puffin were not very enthusiastic about it. Within a year, they wanted to publish a new book every 2 months. We needed help and got it. Gleemanek says, Vault of the Vampire, book 38. Sure, I'll check it out after this. Speaking of the American Steve Jackson and GURPS, Jackson again. As it happens, our first Presents series author was Steve Jackson, the American one, designer of GURPS, who had come over to the UK to talk business with Games Workshop. So the book was Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston present Scorpion Swamp by Steve Jackson. Very confusing. It is so funny. I mean, I already talked about that at length, so I don't need to add anything else. But yeah, wow. I was visiting London, explains US Steve. That's what they should just call him, US Steve. Who was already known to the UK Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston since Games Workshop was distributing his games on this side of the pond. They described their travails in creating fighting fantasy books and the difficulty of flowcharting. I sat down and wrote the first third of Scorpion Swamp, and they liked it. By the way, you can get software now for writing game books, and I've looked at one of them briefly, and like you basically have the graph, like rectangles, and you can connect them, and then you click on a rectangle, and you can look at the text and edit it, so that way you can you don't have to manually write these flowcharts or anything. And this one application I was looking at, when you're done, you can have it output the text. So you can, I think it'll automatically generate the paragraph numbers and sort and you shuffle them up. So that's pretty neat. You don't have to worry about any of that with modern software. And Gleemanek says the author gave up to US Steve. Exactly. I really think they should have started using their middle initial or something. I wonder if they have the same middle initial too. I'm going to check on that really quick. Steve Jackson. The funny thing is, if you Google Steve Jackson, the first two things you're going to see are, at least for me, the two Wikipedia entries, one for American game designer and one for British game designer. You would think that, I would say like, it's a common name, but there seems to be no other famous people with that name, basically. Like they just both happened, both of the famous Steve Jacksons happened to be these game designers born in the early 50s, putting out a lot of stuff in the 80s. Anyway, what I want to look them up for? I wanted to check out if they had middle initials, but the Wikipedia pages don't mention it, so I guess we'll never know. All right. There are still people to this day who do not realize that the Steve Jackson who wrote Scorpion Swamp, Demons of the Deep, and Robot Commando, and the Steve Jackson who wrote such classics as The Citadel of Chaos, House of Hell, and The Creature of Havoc are two completely different people. I did a stream of Creature of Havoc, by the way. It's a very weird one. That's the one I was holding up earlier. You are like a Frankenstein's monster type of creature, and you don't know what's going on. You just wake up and you're in a dungeon. it's weird. You have no agency. You randomly roll to see where you go and stuff like that. I mean, I feel like you do have some agency, but you don't really have full agency. And there's like these complicated. I don't know if I should say complicated. I didn't even really dig into this part yet, but there's like these encoded messages, right? That appear throughout, and you're supposed to decode them in some manner that's not clear to me. I never got that far. I basically did one stream of this that took like 2 or 3 hours, and I didn't nearly explore the extent of this game. But it's also one of the thickest ones as far as I'm aware. It's quite a large book. You compare it to Appointment with Fear right here, and you can see Creature of Havoc is much thicker. Anyway. Occasionally, I am presented with a copy of one of UK Steve books to sign. It says US Steve. That's pretty funny. And if they really want me to sign, I will sign it the wrong Steve Jackson. That's funny that somebody would insist even when he corrects them. Like, actually, I'm not that Steve Jackson. Well, could you sign it anyway? Okay, the wrong Steve Jackson. And Gleeman says, I found US Steve Jackson's email address. We should email him and ask his middle name. Or we could just ask him, why didn't you use your middle initial to distinguish between UK Steve Jackson and yourself? All right. Scorpion Swamp was one of my favorites too. Early, when I was really young, I kind of liked the ones that weren't really too tough to navigate and didn't have too complex puzzles. They were just kind of a fun romp of wandering around a dungeon and killing things and whatnot. And I remember Scorpion Swamp being kind of like that, although you were in a swamp, not a dungeon. I would count Forest of Doom as sort of like that too. Anyway, I do got to wrap it up. So why don't I read I don't know what I'm gonna read. Well, let me finish reading Scorpion Swamp because that one was one that I liked. I'll read about that and then the Vampire's Vault, and then I'll have to call it a stream, unfortunately. I appreciate your chatting with me, Lehman X, and earlier Eric Johnson. But let's read about Scorpion Swamp. It's published in 1984 with cover and internal art by Duncan Smith. Scorpion Swamp sent the hero into the fetid, is it pronounced fetid? Or fetid fens of the title, with nothing but his sword to defend himself, and a magic brass ring that detected evil, as well as letting the hero know which way was north. Unlike other fighting, actually thinking about that moment, it seems like just a simple, like, in-story explanation for how it can always say, well, you can go north at this paragraph or go east at that paragraph. In other words, it was just giving you an excuse for knowing your cardinal directions very well. Unlike other fighting fantasy game books, Scorpion Swamp allowed the player to choose, that's right, choose one of 3 quests from a selection of patrons who are good, evil, and neutral. So you could play it as an evil person if you wanted to. The gameplay was non-linear in design, enabling the hero to revisit locations and explore the swamp as he so desired, a direct consequence of US Steve's background in RPGs. But how did Duncan Smith come to join the esteemed ranks of fighting fantasy illustrators? My mate Ian McKegg. I have so many names I don't know if I'm totally butchering it. Like, usually you see Ian as IAN, and I almost want to say McCraig, but it's not that. Anyway, Ian McKegg had been doing some for Puffin and suggested me to the art director as they were looking for artists for another few books, explained Smith. Our styles were quite similar, and so they liked my work, and that's how it came about. That's a pretty nice painting on the left. Or I don't know if it's paint, but yeah. Could be colored pencils or something. Yeah, I don't think that's paint. It looks like pencil. Probably. Anyway, the artist cites the illustrations of Poomchucker and the Giant as being his favorites from the book. I actually like Scorpion Swamp, he says, referring to the work he did on the title, though I do it very differently now. In 2013, US Steve suffered a flood at his home. Oh. during which all manner of priceless gaming memories and memorabilia were. Yeah, just thinking about that, like, oh, what treasures did he have? That's why you gotta not put priceless things in a basement. I'm like advising myself now about that. Yeah, maybe I should listen to myself. I have like a lot of, I mean, I don't have, priceless creative things like that, but I have like old hand me down video games that are, some of them are pretty rare and stuff like that. Like my dad's been kind of unloading things on me over the past couple of years, and I graciously accept them actually. Anyway, however, he did manage to recover a few pages of the original manuscript for Scorpion Swamp, which he very kindly sent to this book's author for safekeeping. Oh, that's cool. Now this author can lose them in a flood. That's kind of neat though. I think we all had computer printers that looked like this. Dot matrix printers. Remember those? That's what this definitely resembles. Hmm. Excuse me. Lemonix says, I appreciate the detail of the dragon's tail curling underneath the bridge. Oh, I didn't even really notice that. Oh, yeah, I see it now. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, is there much more to say about Scorpion Swamp? Oh, once again, I don't know how to use this tool. Fighting Fantasy Fact. When the U.S. Steve Jackson visited Games Workshop, the plan was that UK Steve and Ian Livingstone would show him the sights of London. However, having been persuaded to write a Fighting Fantasy book for them, that was what he did right then and there in their office. The planned tour of London never happened, but ever since many thousands of readers have enjoyed exploring Scorpion Swamp instead. Okay. He was thinking he could, I guess he was just really eager to get going on that. That's kind of fun. All right, let's look at Vampire's Vault, and then I really do gotta call it a string. I got a big day tomorrow. It's called Vault of the Vampire or Vampire's Vault? Vault of the Vampire. Let's check out the game that Gleamanex played last year. Oh, I remember Sword of the Samurai was pretty cool. It had this honor system. Obviously, it was in like, Japan, like feudal Japan sort of a thing, or yeah, mystical Japan like place actually, a fantasy version of Japan. But yeah, you were a samurai, and you had to maintain your honor, and if your honor ever reached zero, you were dead because your character had to commit seppuku. It was like it was like a separate health meter that had to do with honor rather than just physical damage. And you could get different uh you could choose one special samurai like ability, and I don't remember most of them, but I remember there was one called heroic leaping. So I guess you could like leap unrealistically long distances or possibly even high distance. Yeah, that's pretty neat. There's so many fun game books. All right, but I was gonna look at Vault of the Vampire. I keep finding references to it in other paragraphs, but here we go. Yeah, I never played this one. I've seen the cover before, but I never played it. Did I add that one to my collection? I don't remember. Number 38 in the series was to become another fighting fantasy classic. Incredibly, despite bloodsuckers appearing on a regular basis throughout the previous 37 titles, up until this point, not one of the princes of the night had ever taken center stage and become the big bad to be dealt with at the climax of an adventure. Yeah, that's interesting. It was always just like a throwaway enemy, more or less. Or maybe a tough enemy, but not the main point of the whole adventure. Keith Martin rectified that with Vault of the Vampire, transporting the reader to a fighting fantasy version of Transylvania, blah, realized within the mountainous old world realm of Morastatia, with the obligatory wolves howling at the moon, creepy forests, headless coachmen, and bat-haunted castle. Yeah, I wouldn't mind trying this one. That sounds fun. I actually have a Dracula game book by the author of this book, Jonathan Green. He made it quite. I should just show that real quick. It's not fighting fantasy, but it's worth a look. I kind of have this on cue for something to stream one night, but it's Dracula Curse of the Vampire. It's based on the original novel, and a lot of Jonathan Green's books are based on novels, such as the Beowulf book I streamed. Remember I was saying Creature of Havoc is quite a thick book? Well, here's the Dracula book compared to the Creature of Havoc. It is twice as thick. This is like insane. And I haven't played it yet, but just flipping through the intro, it mentions you can play it as Dracula or a vampire hunter. There might even be multiple options as a vampire hunter. So it almost seems like it's multiple books in one, or at least two books in one. And I can't imagine how much those stories would intertwine. Like, how could you be reusing paragraphs for playing as Dracula versus one of the hunters or something? Anyway, he wrote, yeah. So I'm talking about the author of this, the author of the history book I'm reading now wrote this book, Jonathan Green, not the author of this Vault of the Vampire book. But yeah, Gleeman X said, let's see. This one was fun. I played it with my girlfriend last year. We died, of course, but it was well written. That's pretty nice. In my old age, I'm of the belief of, you can take liberties with the cheating. If you just die, you can go, oh, well, I'm going to go back to where I was and try to remember what my stats were before. And when I do it on a stream, I can rewind the video and see kind of load back to a save point. Because if you die and start over, nobody's got time for that anymore. That's just how it is. I tried to play these books kind of legit back in the day, generally. Cheat once in a while. But yeah, you need a lot of time to be able to really play it honestly. And one thing I found interesting was on I think on Twitter, Ian Livingston he'll like give you magic powers in your game book. If you say something like, I'm fighting, I'm in this adventure and I'm like almost dead. It's so hard. What should you do? He'll say something like, give yourself 20 stamina right now. I'm the author of the game book. I say you can do it. It's like, okay. Thank you, Ian. I've seen him do that a few times. Anyway, yeah, it's the same dimensions besides thickness as the other game books I have, pretty much. But yeah, it's not like, magazine size or anything. But yeah, there's probably a lot of content in there. There's just so much. It's hard being into games so much, and there's so many different kinds of games. I could probably spend the rest of my life just playing game books, but we've got the time. I do definitely want to play this one though. Oh, Gleeman said I've been playing Buffalo Castle repeatedly. That's cool. Trying to win it legitimately. I've created a dozen characters. Not kidding. Oh yeah, I've definitely beaten Buffalo Castle legit. You can definitely do that. Yeah. That's one of those funhouse style books like I was referring to. It's just you walk into a room and there's a weird thing. It's kind of, here's the troll in this room and there's a dragon in that one or whatever. There's one room in Buffalo Castle where there's it's dark, and if you turn on the light, a Medusa or a Gorgon turns you to stone. It's like, all right, you're just sitting there waiting in the dark for me to light a torch. Anyway, yeah, that was a lot of fun. But let's try to wrap this up. I'll finish reading about Vault of the Vampire, and then I'll have to say goodnight, unfortunately. I would love to, just chat with you, Gleeman, or anybody else, and just keep reading this thing until like 3 a.m. No, real life responsibilities are unfortunately fortunately real. Anyway, so where were we? Yeah, Keith Martin. Gleeman says Medusa killed me in our last playthrough. That's funny. I was thinking I'm gonna give a spoiler for a non-existent game book that I might write. It might not even be in a game book form. It might be in anything, any kind of RPG-ish context. I was always thinking I would present that, oh my god, Medusa's around scenario. There's always something like, oh, you enter a grotto or you enter a room and you see these statues of various warriors and other people in, fear-like poses like that. And you go, oh, there's going to be Medusa around. And I thought I would make a variant of that would throw people off, which would be that it's actually the Pigeon King. He collects statues because the Pigeon King likes likes statues. And if you pull out a mirror, the light reflected from the mirror actually attracts the Pigeon King to come and beat you up. Because that's what everybody's gonna do. Like, oh, the statues around. It's gotta be Medusa. Let me get my mirror ready. No, you actually you reflect the light from the, I don't know, whatever, to the sun, and shine over there, and the Pigeon King comes to wreck you. He's gonna kill you. He collects statues and for himself and his pigeon minions. Anyway, maybe he stole some of those statues from Medusa. Right. Let's just read this. I'm getting a little silly now. The plot is what you would expect from such a story too, involving the rescue of a damsel in distress from a bloodthirsty vampire count. The book introduced a faith score. Oh, that's interesting. An attribute that would later be used by Jonathan Green in Knights of Doom, Final Fantasy 56. Easy for Jonathan to make that connection because he was like, hey, I'm gonna borrow this for Knights. I really wish I could just play all these. I mean, really, there's so many cool ideas in them. Now, one thing Jonathan Green does, I don't know if he does this in Fighting Fantasy, but in the other books I've played by him, he makes them really easy. Not that you can just complete it, in 5 minutes or anything like that, or that there's no challenges, but he tries not to screw you the way a lot of these books do. Like, you make one bad roll and you're dead. You're supposed to start over. He kind of like eschews most of that, and I don't know. It's just kind of like it's like he grew up with these and he realized a lot of that BS people don't want to deal with anymore. So just kind of like make them easier. And I think it works really well. He's a really good writer too, and it's amazing how again he puts out a lot of content. They're really really beefy books and everything. All right. Lee Edwards painted the cover for the book, his 7th for Fighting Fantasy. Vault of the Vampire turned out to be one of those classic images. It almost looks like, this is like how every, I don't know what year this was, but this reminds me of like how every vampire they drew in the 80s looked. Maybe the early 90s too. Then once the 90s got rolling, they looked a lot more gothy. The red thing right here in their cape, their collar, I guess. Used to see that a lot. Anyway, well, what year did it? What year was this? Now I'm gonna check that out. Oh, what's going on there? Where did it go? Christ. There we go. Vault of the Vampire. I'm just gonna Google the year real quick. It should say the year for each of these, I would think, but I guess they didn't. But Vault of the Vampire was from 1989. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. Maybe like late 80s, early 90s. Now this was, in my heyday, so to speak, of playing the game, I kind of dropped them probably around this time, maybe around the early 90s or so. And so I kind of, in my mind, the later ones are like the later ones of my heyday are like Sword of the Samurai and Demons of the Deep. So I kind of like dropped them in, around like maybe book 20 or something like that. And this one is 38. Just to give you an idea of when I was playing these most. Anyway, let's keep reading. But I kind of want to actually read the Creature of Havoc entry too, because that's an interesting one. So as usual, I'm extending the stream longer than I should. Yeah, I can't say exactly why. It was just one of those cases where everything works the way that was intended. It's a pretty traditional vampire, but maybe that's part of its strength. It's a simple and dramatic image and very direct. It was a big influence on vampire paintings that I did subsequently. I remember that the publishers asked me to make the girl's breasts smaller, which I did reluctantly. Let's see. I'm like, oh, look at these breasts. Yeah, I can see they wouldn't want them to be like, looking like over the top large. Yeah, they're kind of normal there. It might give an idea of very a kind of trashiness if they were huge. But it would be good to compare and contrast. Maybe that'd be cool if they had both of them here to compare breasts. Martin McKenna, who was still only 18 at the time, turned his hand to producing some very Hammer horror-esque images, for the book's internal illustration that have stood up very well to the test of time. And there's a sequel, Revenge of the Vampire. Oh, look at that. That's pretty cool. To learn the name of a very different kind of fighting fantasy vampire turned to 70. So here's the 18-year-old's artwork, I guess. Martin McKenna. Fighting fantasy fact: both the vampire had a blood-soaked sequel, Revenge of the Vampire. This was the only occasion when a direct sequel to a game book was written by an author other than the series co-creators Jackson and Livingston. Bigger is better, exactly. The modified bigger. Were you here for the City of Terrors? I think you were, right? The modified bigger is better spell. All right, I want to read a little bit about it's something that I had never even heard of. Daggers of Darkness. There's just so much out there. I'm kind of like in awe about how much there is that I'll never have time to explore. It's very sad. But I wanted to look at, Creature of Havoc a little bit, which I saw when I was accidentally scrolling upward. Here we go. And this is one I did not have back in the day myself. But yeah, I played it on stream, and it's definitely an interesting one. And apparently it's very tough to crack, especially those encoded messages or something. I wouldn't mind revisiting it. It's a matter of finding all the time. But here's an example of what the artwork looks like if anybody hasn't seen it. Just the style of it. The Scholastic is more what I'm showing rather than this specific book. It's definitely not the, detailed pen and ink work. It almost looks like digital art. It probably is. And it's fine in its own right. It's not terrible, but compared to, like, look at what you're seeing on the screen here. This old dude who looks very upset. I mean, it hasn't got that soul. It doesn't have the detail. It doesn't have the awesomeness to it, like this. Look at those rats. All right. Oh, you wouldn't have caught the modified. Bigger is better. Yeah, I probably told this story when I was doing the stream. I didn't get it when I was a kid. And I remember at one point saying to my brother, oh yeah, bigger is better is a spell that can give you charisma. And I mentioned that reference, and he was like, I don't think it's like a general purpose charisma spell there. That was kind of a special situation. Anyway. Yeah, you're kind of right, Gleaming. It's kind of like a flash animation style. And yeah, I don't think it's bad in its own right. And if that came out without any other context, like, if it came out like this in a vacuum, I would probably be like, yeah, it's fine art, it's not bad. But just that they threw out all this great artwork. I mean, I wonder what that was about. Was it about they had to pay these artists more royalties if they reused it again, and they just figured, hey, we can just make our own art and it'll be cheaper? Like, ugh. Anyway, I thought I heard that the next, don't quote me on this at all for real, but I thought I heard somewhere that they might be reverting to the artwork in the next print run. I don't know if it's going to be Scholastic as a publisher again or a different one. If that happened, I'm probably going to start loading up my collection. Yeah, I mean, I'd rather have that, the real artwork. Anyway, why don't we finish up here? Creature of Havoc, written by Steve Jackson, the 24th book in this series, has quite rightly gone on to achieve legendary status and remains a firm favorite with many fighting fantasy fans today, even though it is so complex and challenging. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of intriguing that, so many people really think it's great that I would like to try it again. Again, I didn't really give it its, the amount of time it deserved. I did like one stream of maybe 3 hours, and I didn't really even come close to solving any puzzle. I don't think. Utilizing a device that has been imitated many times since. The story begins with the hero waking up with no memory of where he is, how he came to be there, who he is, or even what he is. The hero is the havoc creating creature of the title. The book even goes so far as to initially give the beast no concept of language or reason. The hero attempts to make choices but is often thwarted in the early stages of the adventure when the beast all too often resorts to acting on instinct alone. Yeah, that was pretty cool actually. I guess it was only initially you would be forced to randomly make all your decisions. Slowly, however, the greater plot unfolds as the hero begins to discover what exactly has happened to him and who is responsible for his predicament. Yeah, I didn't solve any of that. Featuring a flying ship, an undead half elf, and Zaradan Mar, an evil witch-born sorcerer. We're kind of getting spoilers here. I mean, it's not really a big deal. It is truly a truly memorable adventure with some wonderful set pieces, and no doubt many a reader has raised a snigger when they discover that the creature's snack food of choice is hobbits. Yes, I remember eating hobbits. The book took Steve Jackson 5 months to write and contains the longest background section of any fighting fantasy adventure. And I remember reading that on the stream live, like going, oh my God, how long is this intro? I think I spent like a half hour reading the intro, or at least like 15 minutes. Running to 19 pages and containing, oh, here we go. I scroll one too many and suddenly I'm on a, like, not, I don't line up one page away. I don't really understand it. Crap. Creature of Havoc. I typed create of Havoc. All right, let's get back into this. Blah, 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 blah. Right, it took Steve Jackson 5 months to write and contains the longest background section of any fighting fantasy adventure, running to 19 pages and containing information on everything from elven birthing practices to the sorcerer Fulgara Darkstorm. Gleeman X is the official D&D cookbook, has a recipe for hobbit stew. What do you put potatoes in it? Potatoes. Jackson. With sorcery, I'd written each adventure longer than the previous one. I didn't have the same 400 reference limit, which had kind of become a standard of the main Fighting Fantasy series. Always looking for new angles, I decided that Creature of Havoc would set the reader as a monster. That was a new feature. Excuse me. Yeah, almost time for Betty Bye for me. That wouldn't be bound by the 400 reference adventure. I was particularly pleased with the reader having to learn a language. Yeah, so you get this gibberish messages that you're supposed to figure them out. But how was Jackson able to include hobbits in the book? I can remember there being some debate at the time as to whether hobbits were copyrighted or not. Someone somewhere came up with a reference to hobbits in medieval literature. Really? Now I've seen over the years different RPGs try and sometimes avoid the word hobbits entirely. And I think about how halflings often gets generally used. But the first time I encountered something like that was in Ultima 3 from 1983, the computer RPG. And they didn't have hobbits, they had bobbits. It was clearly they were trying to avoid using the word hobbit. And also in Ultima, they avoided using the word Balrog. They said Balron. So I guess, what's his name? Richard Garriott was kind of cautious about that. Now, Tunnels and Trolls, they always had hobbits until a relatively recent edition. I don't remember which one. It's still several years ago at this point. But they decided to drop it and call them Hobbs. So I guess they feared something something, some legal action or something like that. And they don't have orcs anymore, even ORC. They call them Uruks, Urukh. So yeah, apparently they tried to avoid all kind of such thing. They also changed a Balrog to something else. There was a Balrog in Naked Doom, the Naked Doom Tunnel and Troll solo adventure, but they changed that to, I think they call it something like a cotter, or I don't know what a cotter is, but I think that's the word they used. Anyway, once again, I'm getting sidetracked with silliness. But yeah, I was particularly pleased with the reader having to learn a language. But how was Jackson able to include hobbits in the book? Yeah, that's right. We already read that. They found a reference to hobbits in medieval literature. Go figure. The book featured another Ian Millen cover. The green-skinned figure that appeared upon it was originally supposed to be Daramus, the undead half-elf. However, when Jackson saw the finished painting, he was so impressed, he went back and changed the text so that the figure on the front became the creature's vile nemesis, the black-hearted half-demon sorcerer, Zaradan Mar. Wait, this is not your character? Then it's... Huh. That's the evil half-demon sorcerer Zaradan Mar. Okay. In truth, I did not know this, Miller told Alex Ballingall when he was interviewed for the Fighting Fantasy fanzine Fighting Fantasine. Say that 10 times fast. The Fighting Fantasy fanzine Fighting Fantasine. But it's nice to think the image resonated, so maybe that comes of reading the book and meeting the author. Alan Langford produced the internal illustrations for the book, including such fondly remembered monsters as the Claw Beast, the Toadmen, and the disturbing undead Master of Hellfire. I enjoyed doing that one, says Langford. I didn't like the murder of hobbits, though. I'm quite fond of them. Creature of Havoc was the last fighting fantasy title to bear the green zigzag banner. I guess I don't have that in my copy. The green zigzag banner across the top of its cover. And it's also the last fighting fantasy game book Jackson ever wrote. Until 2022. Wow, we took a break. What was this, 1986? So he took a break between 1986 and 2022. Yeah, I kind of wish they would just say the year for each one in parentheses. But I'm assuming because these illustrations are copyright 1986, and that's probably around when Creature of Havoc came out. Probably that same year, or maybe give or take a year. Anyway, the book remains a fan favorite to this day. It was full of great details and ingenious puzzles, says John Ingle of Inkle Studios, the people behind the app version of Jackson's. By the way, I'm encountering kind of several minor spelling and grammar errors and things like missing commas, and this one, it should be Inkle with a capital I, Inkle Studios. It's a little unfortunate, but oh well. People behind the app version of Jackson's sorcery series and really pushed the boundaries of how these books could work. All right. Well, I'm going to have to call it here. I've already extended the stream longer than I meant to, which is kind of the norm for me, I guess. So yeah, thanks for all the chatting, Gleemanex, and thanks for letting me geek out over this history of the Fighting Fantasy books. Been a lot of fun. I used to like this one, Trial of Champions, too. You can do a quick flip through and look at some neat artwork. This is the cover that my cover doesn't have because I got the fancy one. By the way, for those who just joined, I am reading over the PDF, but I got myself this fancy hardcover version because I think it looks very beautiful. You are the hero. It's very shiny. It also came with various physical goodies. Okay, let's give it a quick flipping through. Here's our Zagor, the evil wizard dude from Warlock of Firetop Mountain. Here's that dragon we saw earlier. He looks very sleepy, yet he's breathing fire. He's like, I'm gonna fry you guy. We got this. Yeah, we saw that one before. This one. This one actually reminds me of something Liz Danforth would have illustrated for Tunnels and Trolls, but it's not her. Here's that dragon again. This guy from Citadel of Chaos. Here's the cover model for Forest of Doom. Different Citadel of Chaos cover. What's this one? Yes, Tromos Tower, huh? Oh, there's a nasty looking ghoul. That guy looks very wet. Looks like as he moves, he'd probably sound like... he'd sound very squishy. Russ Nicholson. Was he the... He's an artist. I think that might be the name I heard. That he died recently, sadly. Yeah, he died in May 2023. A lot of good illustrations are done by him. That's sad. Here's one that's this is the cover of City of Thieves, I believe. I think this is the boss man of that one. Here's your City of Thieves. Island of the Lizard King with Oyster Bay. You know, I gotta really just skim this quick to see if they mention the Long Island references anywhere here. Oyster Bay and Fire Island. They don't really mention much about it at all. There's just this one small paragraph. Oyster Bay mentioned here. The Living Corpse. That's a pretty grim one. Look at that. Pretty gruesome one. Huh. The Living Corpse. Let's look at that thing. It's got like all its limbs and other body parts just completely separate. I guess it somehow attacks you by floating arms at you or something. It's a pretty neat looking werewolf. Death Trap Prisoner. Beastman Champion. Urgh. He's got several severed heads on his belt. There's our favorite Manticore from the cover of the sorcery book. Shamatanti Hills. All right, folks. Maybe I want to cut it. It's like I don't want to end it. I do want to end it. Brain Slayer. That was a Brain Slayer. Oh man. That's a Brain Slayer apparently. I wonder if it's supposed to be like a Mind Flayer from D&D. Cool. Steven X says, thank you for staying up to chat and walking through this marvelous book. Yeah, my pleasure. I'm going to buy the ebook. Cool, yeah. Go for it. Yeah, it's a nice read. This map is pretty cool. Alright, yeah, I gotta definitely call it a stream, guys. But yeah. Yeah, it's a great book. I'm hoping, Jonathan Green wouldn't mind that I flipped through it on this channel. But hey, it looks like he's getting a sale just from this stream. So, I don't think he would argue with that. Gleeman X says Netflix's One Piece show has a character that is a living corpse. Very entertaining how they imagined it and animated it in the CGI. Huh, I have no idea of that show. I never heard of that. All right, let me get out of here. Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you, Gleeman X. Thank you, Eric Johnson. Thank you, whoever else is watching. Had a lot of fun going through this. This is You Are the Hero, an interactive history of fighting fantasy game books. I will probably do another stream next Wednesday, and who knows what it'll be. But yeah, that's it, guys. Have a good night and take care.